Hey, to bring it back to R.E.M. too, which is something that we can do on a podcast. Everybody Hurts, another great multi-car pile-up scene
Oh,
on
true.
a
Yeah.
freeway. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry.
Listen,
So
I could even go more obscure because when I think of Everybody Hurts now, I think of Mission Hill, the forgotten one season
Oh
long
my
animated
God!
series.
Yeah,
Were you a Mission Hill
absolutely.
guy? Okay, good.
I remember. I certainly couldn't quote it probably as deeply as.
Were you a Mission Hill guy?
Yeah.
There are times where I truly hate being your friend.
Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, we're joined by news director Andrew Daniels to examine the 1957 drama, Nashville.
Our guest today is news director at Hearst Magazine's Enthusiast Group and also Fun at Parties. Andrew Daniels joins us today to talk about Robert Altman's Nashville. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, it is my pleasure, fellas. This is a treat for me, and I'm looking forward to our banter about, like you said, a completely linear and a movie that just makes total sense upon every watch and subsequent rewatch. Yes,
it's a total 3-act Save the Cat movie. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, and everybody understands its messaging completely. Definitely no way to misinterpret it. Everything's fine.
I mean, it holds your hand the entire time.
It's gonna be
it's the Green Book of its day.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us, and also thank you for your thematic backdrop for this.
You like it? Yeah. You know what? I was trying to dig up my. I went to Nashville a year or two ago, and went and saw a Nashville Sounds game, which is of course the minor league baseball team down there. And I've got Sounds gear somewhere in the in my domicile, but this will do. The guitar backdrop will have to do. So yes, obviously this is in many ways, excuse me. Like the greatest music documentary ever, right? That just so happens to be like 1/3 of a, crazy narrative as well. And so, yeah, as a music guy, right. Like this movie rules. And it's just incredible. And I can't wait to talk about the music for like a half an hour if you guys are cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cause
Yeah.
Cause the first time I watched it, which was almost 20 years ago in college, I didn't realize that all the songs were original. Which is, I think, like the coolest wrinkle to this movie. But yeah, we can get to that. Sorry, I'm interrupting your banter.
No,
you
please.
can just let me know when you want me to
please,
jump in.
It's fine. Yeah. We're gonna jump through different storylines and different convos, and Mike will be talking about something. Then it'll cut to me just randomly roasting some topic where you're just like, how did he get to Harry Belafonte? I don't know.
Think about
that's how this movie is constructed anyway. Just that's classic Altman is just.
I am Jeff Goldblum on the tricycle.
The tricycle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I'm so excited to do this. And obviously this is very cool because Tom is meeting Andrew for the first time. And,
yes.
I have to say, I knew this would be a good fit because, as I'll say right here, I've discovered Andrew has the exact same broken brain issue that Tom and I do. It was really crystallized. I was out in your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania, and we were grabbing lunch. It was you, me, and a mutual friend of ours, Dan. And there was just this thing where it was 3 people talking.
Yes.
Where whenever one person said anything, no matter how innocuous, another person was interjecting with a pop culture reference.
Yep.
I don't remember what it was. Yeah, just...
Our brains are broken, and it's toxic, and I don't know what your partner's deals are, if
I don't have one.
Break. Okay, well there's
my brain's broken. I can't relate to people. They're like, oh, we're going to see Night Swim on Friday. Tom, what are you doing? Oh, I'm watching $10,000 for a Massacre. And they go, what is that? And I go, no explanation's going to help. It's not going to help. It's going to make it worse, honestly, if you know what I'm talking about.
Now, you just said Night Swim, and I'm aware of the movie. I haven't seen it, but immediately...
I haven't seen it either.
My brain goes to Night Swimming, the song by
R.E.M. Yeah. Yep.
And then it goes to a mix CD that I made for my high school friends who graduated high school of which Night Swimming was I think the last track on it. So yeah, let's just feel free to rein me in. The
all right,
moment I
well,
spin out of
all right,
control.
well, quick question, just because of that, because of broken brain syndrome. What would have been worse? I haven't seen Night Swim, but would playing that R.E.M. song during Night Swim be better or worse than Time to Pretend playing in Saltburn when it is actually time for Barry Kagan to pretend?
I haven't seen. I trust that you guys haven't seen the Bob Marley movie yet, One Love.
No,
or maybe you have.
No, I will never see it,
and I'm not going to yet. To be clear, but I've in all the reviews that I've read, they do the exact same thing where it's like, he's in a fight with his wife and No Woman No Cry comes on, or he's in a jam session and like they play jamming, or whatever. So I would still say the former choice, right, Tom? Like night swimming during Night Swim seems like the less obvious.
I'm just
choice,
shocked.
Probably. It's more.
I'm just shocked that now that you mention it and you put that together, I am astounded at the restraint that the trailer did not have a slowed down Night Swimming deserves a quiet night.
Yeah.
Oh man. Like we were so close to that.
Listen, you could tell Blumhouse wasn't totally into the movie, so if it was like an October release, they would have sprung a little extra money for the slowed down cover of that song. But I still think the Saltburn thing is worse because fuck Saltburn and everybody that stands for it.
Tom, so we are about to later this week record our Oscar special that to our viewers and listeners came out a month ago, but I remember vividly before the nominations came out, Tom watched Saltburn like a couple days before and texted me, goes, I hate this. This is terrible. It's awful. It's getting nominated. Just called it right off the bat. And luckily, we avoided
wrong. Yeah.
We avoided that one.
Yeah.
But thank Christ.
have not seen it yet, but I like borderline detested Promising Young Woman, so I know the
borderline?
Yeah.
Oh, so you had more restraint than me.
Yeah, I just not for me, right? Emerald Fennell, not for me.
Emerald Fennell, the woman who made a rape revenge movie that is pro cop, so that's good.
Wow. Love it.
Yeah.
This show's me 4 hours long. I can't wait. This is gonna be as long as Nashville the movie.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever wanted to feel what
it might end in an assassination too. You never know. Even though we're all in separate corners of the world or the East Coast. Or
hey, I'm Italian. And assassinations are always in the cards with my family. So, yeah.
Well, we're so excited to have you. So you already alluded a little bit to why you settled on this film when we sent you the list. But I would love to talk a bit because you and I touched on it briefly and we said we'll save it for the show. What is, you mentioned when you saw Nashville, what's your history with Robert Altman? I know you said you've seen a couple of his films. What's your...
Right. A couple. I think the first Altman I saw was Popeye, as probably many kids maybe would say, like, right. It's not like kids are watching, The Long Goodbye or,
Quintet.
Exactly. Right. So like, I mean, not
Abe and Mrs. Miller.
Yeah. Right. So that was probably my first Altman, and most recently was The Player, which I had never seen, and upon rewatching Nashville, so many similarities between the two. It's almost like, spiritual sequel in many ways, like 15, 20 years later. Not a ton of Altman though, right? And so kind of a blind spot for me that I'd love to kind of dive a little deeper into his oeuvre. I never can say that word right. But right, so just, again, I watched this movie, like I said, about 20 years ago in freshman year, like a seminar called Music and Society, right? It's just right there. It is like, if ever there were a movie that better represents those two things, I suppose it's Nashville. But really did not remember much about it beyond just how sprawling it is, especially upon watching like later Altman and sort of some of the movies that were inspired by his style. And so I watched it again last night for the first time in 2 decades. And boy, what a movie. This movie rules. This movie is so good and so funny and so cynical and just such a joy from start to finish. And one of those movies that 3 hours long, just about, but certainly feels not even remotely that long, just because it's so vibrant and it moves and it's schizophrenic and chaotic and just like you're never bored, right? And yeah, really just what a fun one this was. And I forget what else was on the list that you presented with me, but I feel like this one just, and especially as a music guy, was really just right up, right down the middle, I should say, to mix sports metaphors. So yeah, guys, this movie rules.
Tom, why don't we get into your Altman familiarity? Because I think the interesting thing, I'll just presage, I'm a bigger Altman guy than you are, but you had actually seen this particular title before me. So
yeah, I did. I think like Andrew here. Probably Popeye was the first one because it was you're a kid and it's Popeye. Your parents probably didn't really think about it, and it was on TV. Like, yeah, it's Popeye, great, but didn't really get into Altman for real until college, a little after college. I know we saw The Long Goodbye in college, and I didn't love it at the time. It's one I need to rewatch as I've gotten older and my tastes have broadened. But Nashville, I picked up during a Criterion sale, just because I've heard so much about it. I was like, all right, I'll pick it up, whatever, I'll watch it. And I liked it at the time, but I didn't really connect to the, oh my God, it's a, American masterpiece that there's no flaws. And I was like, no, it's good, but, it's fucking 3 hours long and they play like 3 songs in a row every 15 minutes. It's like, okay, let's get moving, guys. I'm a 22-year-old kid. And I'm kind of dumb. So let's get along here. But yeah, I mean, in recent years, I've definitely gotten more into him, even though he's a guy with like 80 fucking movies and like 65 of them are like either forgotten or amongst the worst movies ever made. And that's not even like being mean. It's like kind of just how people talk about him. It's like, oh, remember that 20 years where he made movies that were so bad people wanted to like deport him to like Antarctica? Like, hey, who's talking about Dr. T and the Women? Who's talking about the Gingerbread Man?
Listen, people every day when I go out on the street are like, "Have you watched Cookie's Fortune yet?" It's people.
Yeah, like, oh, we're talking about quintets. Like with a movie I actually just watched, Fool for Love. Hey, remember when he made a Sam Shepard stage play into a movie with Sam Shepard, and nobody knows this movie exists? And it's like, oh yeah, of course I own that movie. But The Player I got into, and that was great. For this episode, like I said, I watched Fool for Love. I watched California Split, which might be my favorite Altman of the ones I've seen so far. That's a great scumbum dudes rock movie.
Dudes rock.
Dudes do rock.
Oh,
they do.
Dudes rock more in California Split than they do in Dr. T and Medicine Women, or whatever that Richard
Did you just call it Dr. T and the
Medicine Women? I don't know. What is the Medicine Woman? Isn't that
you just confused Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait, hang on. So I want to clarify.
Dr. T.
You combined Dr. T and the Women with Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman and somehow made essentially the band from the Muppet Show, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. You somehow combined them all.
Broken brain.
Well, listen, that's the only thing that could have made Nashville better is if Dr. T and the Electric Mayhem were in this movie.
I'm just picturing
or Dr. Quinn.
Yeah. Dr. T doing, can you picture that? Bullet goes in and stuffing goes flying out.
As Ronnie Blakely gets shot.
This ain't Dallas, it's Nashville.
California Split. I watched MASH this morning for the first time, and boy, does that movie fucking suck.
You're gonna come around to it. I had the same. So I will say with all.
No, I'm not. There's still like a bunch of like the big ones I haven't seen. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen Gosford Park. I haven't seen Shortcuts. I haven't seen Thieves Like Us. I haven't seen Three Women. There's like a bunch of big ones that I haven't seen that I still want to see. And because I'm a freak with a broken brain and no personal life, I'll still see the garbage ones that, make Menachem Golan look like fucking David Lean.
So with me, with Altman, I'm going to say this. My first was not Popeye. I did not see Popeye until many, many years later because I had the kind of situation where my parents would take me to the video store a lot, right? I would go to the video store a lot, but they had strong opinions. And so
Yeah.
I couldn't just walk up to them with any old movie and be like, can I rent this? Because if they thought it sucked or they had just heard it sucked, they would go, no. And Popeye was one that I was like, there's a Popeye movie. And I remember my mom's going, yeah, and it's awful. No. So my first Altman was actually A Prairie Home Companion. His
The
final
last
film.
one. Yeah.
Because I was just old enough. Like, that came out in 2006. So I was like 15, 16. I was just starting to pay attention to movies. Like, I always liked movies, but I was just starting to pay attention. Like, I was reading Entertainment Weekly. I was keeping up with this. And I didn't know who Robert Altman was other than, like, he's a name.
Did you know who Garrison Keillor was?
I was familiar with Prairie Home Companion, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, not a thing that I listened to a lot. I just know, like, Dad would be flipping through the radio and he would hit NPR and have it on for like 5 seconds before he found the hockey game. So occasionally you would just hear this weird voice because my dad would be like, NPR sucks. And then you would hear it for 5 seconds and it'd either be Leonard Lopate or it would be Garrison Keillor. And either way, it's just this weird thing that you don't hear anywhere else on radio, right? Going through like 1,000 talk radio stations, especially in like the 90s, 2000s. It's mostly like weird conservative shit, Howard Stern, and then like briefly like one guy going, let me tell you about this book no one's read in 50 years. And so I had to, but I saw Prairie Home Companion first, and then, which I was like mixed on. Then I saw McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And because I was a big Leonard Cohen fan. So I watched McCabe and Mrs. Miller, fell head over heels for McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I think I was, when I first saw it, like texting Tom, like, you need to watch this movie. It's incredible. Went through a couple of his films, didn't get around to Nashville for a while because, similar to the video store thing, my mother had seen Nashville when it came out and hated it. And she was just like, she's like, it's so boring. It's so weird. But then again, she was young when it came out, right? Not to mention, my mom was like very optimistic in the 70s.
Sure.
She was like, Carter's going to fix everything. So seeing that movie and its full cynical take, then
it is
like,
one of the most cynical movies ever, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like, you could read it lots of ways, and I'm sure we'll get into theories, but yeah, it's just like, that's, upon rewatching it last night, like, it seeps through every frame of that movie. It's just like,
and there's a very specific reason why, and we'll get to that. But so I just known that she had told me like, oh, it's boring, it sucks. It popped up on the AFI 100 movies list, the revised version, not the original. The original had MASH, the revised version had Nashville, and it wasn't until I think Unspooled was coming out, the Paul Scheer, Amy Nicholson podcast, which I didn't keep up with, but I was like, oh, well, this gives me the reason to watch the AFI list. I'll finally get around to Nashville, which I had like some cheap DVD copy of. Watched it, and then I remember immediately texting Tom and going, oh, why didn't anyone tell me this is the great American movie? Why did no one tell me that this is a fucking masterpiece? And so I watched this 3-hour movie, and then the next day watched it again. So I am as pro Nashville as a person could get. It's one of my all-time favorites, and we'll get into that ending. I think that ending is one of the it's just one of the most impressive endings of any film. But before we get into the film and why it's great and what we think about it, let's hear what the National Film Registry had to say about Nashville. Here's what the Library of Congress has to say about Robert Altman's Nashville.
Robert Altman directed this funny and poignant series of vignettes following more than 20 characters, including several who are country music performers, as they gather at a Nashville political rally. The film's power lies in its ability to be sarcastic, hopeful, and revelatory all at once, as it manages to skewer and honor its subject simultaneously. Stars include Henry Gibson, Ronnie Blakely, Karen Black, Lily Tomlin, and Keith Carradine, who sings the haunting I'm Easy.
Now, that statement says that the film is satirical, cynical. I don't know where they're getting that from, because the movie starts with its thesis statement, right? We're heading into, this movie comes out the year of the Bicentennial, right? And this movie starts out with the emphatic statement, we must be doing something right to last 200 years. So, I mean, I don't know how you can read that as cynical. That's clearly sincere. Altman truly believes that we must be doing something right to last 200 years.
Well, one point is funny because it doesn't come out in the Bicentennial. It's actually set in the near future. This comes out in 75.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's kind of calling his shot, which I saw him kind of almost laughing, where he's like, oh, Walker did become president. Jimmy Carter won in 76.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, this is a very happy movie. It calls its shot. By having that song, Loves America, has that song being sung by a man named Haven. So he's saying this land is a haven for all the best people in the world, best dressed people too. Haven, style icon, I should say. I texted Mike.
Were you guys texting about where
coordinating our
nudie suits? Yeah, exactly.
Haven Hamilton.
I couldn't find
suits,
mine. Yeah.
Nudie suits. Yeah. Also, because I texted Mike, the way a lot of people, this movie's talked about a lot in film circles, great movie and all that. I feel like nobody really mentions how fucking crazy the actual beginning of this movie is.
Mm-hmm.
That it starts like
we're not skipping over the credits, right?
Absolutely not.
The fucking like infomercial commercial for itself. Which I'm just like, what the fuck is this?
It feels like it's skipping 5 times over, right? Where it's just like, it's almost like too many words to get out, right? And he's just like, oh, and by the way, Lily Tomlin, and oh, by the way, Keith Carradine.
The fucking Micro Machines guy. Yeah.
Yes.
It's not really, but do you know why it starts that way?
Because Altman does drugs.
No, it actually starts that way. So they were shooting in Nashville for like 40-something days, right? And like the whole cast had to go down there and live in the same like sucky condos for 40-something days. The only person who was exempt from that was Karen Black. Karen Black was like helicoptered in for her days of shooting, had a luxury hotel. Everybody in the cast was pissed about it, and Altman did that on purpose to make everybody pissed at her. They were there for so long that one of the final days, a local Nashville artist came to Altman and presented him with a drawing, like a painting he had done of the whole cast. And that's what you see at the beginning, right? On the record cover. Altman saw this, loved it, right? But was like, I love this. I'd love to use this. There's no way that Paramount will like make this a poster or anything. Because quite frankly, he wasn't even sure Paramount was going to release the fucking thing.
Right. Which
is why in the most baller, even before this, the very start of the movie, if you watched it and went, that Paramount logo looks like shit. That's because Altman took the master and stomped on the Paramount logo. That's on the master. He intentionally fucked up the Paramount logo. So he decided, oh, well, this would be fun. What if I use that artwork in the beginning and I make it look like one of those greatest hits compilation commercials that you see on TV? So that's why that's done that way. Is like, because there were so many of those, especially back then, so many like greatest
Dan Perry too, right? This was the Star Wars guy. He also did The Crawl. Yeah.
Wow,
what a go.
That's great story, but also that's just an insane thing to do.
Yeah.
That's just like, hey, we already got a long movie. Let's just introduce this weird meta infomercial at the beginning of our movie, kind of telling you what's going to happen in the movie, and you go, okay. Which kind of reminds me of like, he was an old man when he made this movie.
He was
50.
He's like 50, yeah.
So
because he was 81 when he died, and this was almost exactly 30 years before. So he was an old man. This wasn't like, oh, he had a big success with MASH for his first movie, and he got this big crazy sophomore effort, and he made it this big bloated thing. This isn't like a Heaven's Gate thing. It's like, no, this guy was working for a very long time.
Yeah.
And he was very drunk, very stoned, and very angry all the time.
Well, on this one, not so much, though, because this was the one where he had all free reign. So Molly Haskell makes a great point.
I mean, he was still angry. He was an angry man. He stomped on the Paramount logo.
But not quite with this one. So Molly Haskell has a great point in her Criterion essay, which basically points out, like, Altman is both part of that new Hollywood movement and also kind of the elder statesman. He's got a decade on Scorsese and Spielberg and all those guys. He came up starting in industrial films, TV episodes, a lot of that stuff. And all the while, he really wanted to shake up what you could do with movies and break free of the narrative structure, right? Obviously, MASH is a big breakthrough, and he's experimenting more and more, right? Does McCabe and Mrs. Miller, does Thieves Like Us. As I was mentioning to Tom earlier, California Split, which he makes before this one, is where he starts to pioneer the idea of, and now obviously this is very common, but the idea of, fuck it, we're just going to mic up the actors. Like, we're going to put lav mics on Elliot and George Siegel. So even if I'm doing a wide shot, even if I'm doing whatever, I'm picking up everything they're saying. And I can just use it whenever. And
that is like a natural extension of the shit he was pulling in MASH. That MASH was the one where it really, the overlapping dialogue and everyone's just yelling and you can't really figure out what the fuck is going on because it's like, oh, this is just how people are. They talk over each other and blah blah blah. So then the next step, California Split. There you go. And now Nashville. It's like, well, here's 100 people.
Did Robert Altman invent the podcast? Lots of just dudes talking over each other.
Well, here's the funny thing about Altman is that for all of that, he would be terrible on a podcast.
Yeah.
Because I started the commentary for Nashville on the Criterion. The Criterion Disc has a great documentary on the making of Nashville, which was made in 2013 after Altman had died, and it's everybody being very insightful and varied. And then you start Altman's commentary, and it's just him going, yeah, people criticize the film for saying that the music in the film wasn't Nashville music. I didn't want to make Nashville music. I wanted to make good music, and they don't make a lot of good music down in Nashville. And you're just like, oh boy, buddy. And one of the things is
one of my favorite things, because I just reading up on stuff on the commentary for The Long Goodbye, he goes, oh, it's a damn shame Lee Brackett died before the movie came out, and she couldn't get to see her work. She died 6 years after the movie came out. She saw the movie, Rob.
So one of the things that makes this fascinating that I hadn't realized is that this was not initially. This is not. It's Altman's magnum opus in retrospect, but it's not like this was the thing he had been dying to do forever, right? In fact, it was not even his idea.
It's an accident.
Jerry Weintraub came up with the idea, well, if you have a good record, you can make money back on the movie, right? The movie doesn't even need to be a hit. Like, the soundtrack is going to make your money back, which is true for a number of films. Like, I think The Phantom of the Paradise may have been profitable just from the soundtrack, even though the movie itself was a bomb, right? Yeah. That's years later, but still. So Jerry Weintraub comes up with the idea and approaches Altman about it. And Altman then is like, okay, yeah, I guess we could do something. And reaches out to Joan Tewksbury, who is the co-writer of this film, who had been working with him since she was like a script person on McCabe and Mrs. Miller and all that. Tewksbury's a fascinating person in her own right. He goes to Tewksbury, goes, we're making a movie about Nashville. She takes 2 separate trips down to Nashville, and almost everything you see in this movie she experienced, right?
Yeah. So she was the Opal, right?
Yes.
Like, isn't Opal sort of the stand-in? Yeah.
Quite literally to the point where, like, she got stuck in a traffic jam because of a car accident and then was brought into a recording studio for a gospel session, just like you see happens to Opal, a.k.a. Geraldine Chaplin, which is so funny.
Wow. That's the BBC reporter?
Yes.
Yeah.
Seems mean to make your writer stand in that character.
The dumbest character.
Well, I think
because the biggest dipshit in the world.
Well, because it's so interesting that you've got Tewksbury writing the script. She brings it to Altman, right? People who originally, the producers aren't fans of the script. People are iffy on the script. It's all over the place. The biggest note Altman gives her is he goes, well, it has to end in an assassination. Altman starts bringing in the politics, right? Tewksbury is trying to observe what she saw in Nashville, right? She creates these characters. The fucking, now I'm forgetting his name, the assassin, right? Kenny.
Stephen King.
Yeah, Kenny the assassin, who looks like Stephen King. Kenny the assassin happens just because she was driving past that boarding house, literally the Keenan Wynn boarding house, and sees a young guy with a guitar case going in. And she's like, okay, this is a nice little boy with a guitar case, right? He's a hopeful. And her script is like, he's a hopeful, right? That's it. He's just a hopeful young man. He's the nicest kid in the whole movie. And Altman reads the script and goes, he's going to shoot somebody. Right?
And I love that because the structure of the movie, you think, I mean, even if you went in and said somebody told you there was an assassination at the end of the movie, because you don't have any sense that that's going to happen. But if you go in knowing, you think, oh, Scott Glenn's going to kill her.
Well, that's the beauty of it. So apparently Tewksbury...
But it's actually this fucking guy.
Well, here's where it gets interesting. Altman didn't want it to be Barbara Jean at first. Altman's first pitch was Kenny kills Sue Lin. Right?
Oh, that would have been too mean.
Yeah,
at the Parthenon, like the same way. Like
as far as from what I can tell, that was the pitch, right? Well, originally he was like, there has to be an assassination. It should be Sue Lin. Tewksbury goes, not Sue Lin, right? I'll give you an assassination, not Sue Lin. It can be Barbara Jean. So that's
I wonder if they ever considered, if anybody ever considered Walker, right? Like, because naturally you think, famous assassinations in history, they're all, politicians.
Well, part
right?
of Altman's angle is
before John Lennon. Yeah,
he wanted it to be a woman because he said you haven't seen a woman assassinated.
That's true.
So she goes, "How about Barbara Jean?" And he fires back in the negotiation. Okay, it could be Barbara Jean, but it has to be Kenny that shoots her. And Tewksbury was pissed because she's like, he's a sweet boy.
Yeah.
Apparently, in an earlier cut of the film, though, you didn't see the gunshot.
Yeah,
and it was actually left ambiguous whether it was Scott Glenn. Kenny.
Well, because the way they have the shot in the movie, it's from far away. You don't know, like, something's going to happen and then just bam. So you could see how you would edit that where you don't know who did it.
Yeah.
But then they show fucking Kenny with his little gun because he's a
well, and they also before that they show him opening the guitar case. Right? He's got the thing around his neck and he opens the guitar case. In any event, that's all to say.
I think it's a fiddle, by the way. Just throwing it out there. I'm pretty sure it's a fiddle case.
Well,
you would know
because he yells at L.A. Joan in the boarding house.
Yeah,
don't touch the fiddle. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, but listen, you would
have
know.
To actually, yeah.
You have every string instrument behind you right now, so
not a fiddle. I wish. Yeah.
And I have every weapon I've assassinated country music stars with.
It's Tom. Have you forgotten this is still an audio medium too? People will just hear this. They don't know what's behind you.
Yeah, I know.
You know what? Well, that's your job when the Fed show up.
Yeah, fucking take me. I got nothing to live for.
It's
yeah.
I mean, but I will say, Joan. The fascinating thing I was trying to say is what makes this movie interesting is that there is a lot of push and pull going on. Even though Altman is like the head guy, right?
Yeah.
He's letting the actors improvise, but he's like the guy in charge. Tewksbury was very influential on this film. And he was going very allegorical, I'm not making a movie about Nashville, I'm making a movie about America. He was big on the political angle of it. But Tewksbury would always come in and bring a more sympathetic side to a lot of things. She talked about, in the documentary I watched, about the Sue Lin character, where she basically said, I knew people like that. She goes, I was working at a bar when I was trying to make my way through college. We knew a girl who... She was very sweet, but very naive. Playboy showed up and said, we'd like to do a photo shoot with you. And she thought they wanted to do headshots. And she showed up and she did it. And she was like, whatever. But she was like, oh, I really didn't expect it to go that way. And she was like, well, that's Sue Lin. Because that's the character. That's kind of the ethos of the movie.
Yeah.
Do you read her as a tragic character? Because I kind of actually feel like there are far more tragic characters in that movie than Sue Lin.
I mean, I think they're all tragic characters, basically. I think
for sure they're all.
I don't even know if I could put it into like different degrees. I think they're all just on the same level of they're all fucked and they're all miserable, and maybe she's less tragic because she's too stupid to realize she's tragic. Like the fact that the fucking police captain from RoboCop is trying to like slap it out of her, like, no, you're fucking bad. Stop doing this shit, you dumb white girl. Stop doing this. And she goes, oh, you're just jealous. And he goes, what are you fucking talking about? I'm jealous. You suck. Stop doing this.
Here's what I'll say. And I think, Joan says this in the documentary, that she's kind of, it's that Sue Lin is sort of the character that the whole movie pivots on, right? Because it's not when you have the Sulin striptease moment, right?
Fucked up.
It's fucked up. But not only that, it kind of, even though that's not the exact midpoint of the movie or anything, characters start to change then.
It's
right?
when shit starts going wrong.
You have Michael,
100%,
you have Michael Murphy in that moment realizing, oh, I don't want to be a part of this. You mentioned the police captain from RoboCop being like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to Detroit. Even smaller things. Keith Carradine, right, who's been in the hotel room banging everybody left, right, and center. Lily Tomlin leaves, and she leaves with her dignity, and she leaves with that, and he doesn't really know what to do with that.
Because it's never happened.
Yeah, it's
never happened
a
before.
reckoning point, right? And I think that, Sulin, when you say
fucking Ned Beatty tries to pick up Sulin.
Yes, exactly.
Like a weird, sweaty little freak.
And the thing that I love, too, is that, I mean, obviously, Michael Murphy doesn't see Ned Beatty do that, but he already has a bad vibe because Ned Beatty forces her to strip. That later, when Walker, when we're at the Palladium, where Walker's there, right? And Ned Beatty's like, can I just go meet him, talk to him? And Michael Murphy's like, no, he's busy. I'm not, clearly, I'm not bringing him around you.
And he stops being the politician when Alan Garfield's like, oh, not supposed to have any signs behind Barbara Jean and all that. And at that moment, he's just like, I don't give a fuck.
Snaps.
Your crazy wife already fucked up before. You wanted to fuck up again? Fine. I'll get somebody else. And Alan Garfield's like, oh, well, if you're going to stab me like that, okay.
You're right. Everybody's sort of at their breaking point because it's been 5 days, 5 hot, sweaty days, chaos, like Triplet, right? Like the advisor at the end, it just kind of has it, right? So he breaks and lays it on Barnett, right? Barnett is his name? Yeah. Barbara Jean's, yeah.
And even then, though, what I love is Michael Murphy's choice in that, right? Where you're right, Tom. He turns around and he goes, it's your wife who screwed up. We can get somebody else. And when he goes, well, you're stabbing my wife in the back. It's that Michael Murphy decides to have the character go, well, no, you're the one who's going to be stabbing her in the back, buddy. Like he stammers. He gives him this thing of he's snapping, but in snapping, he loses his composure. He loses his ability to speak. It's, I don't know. But so I think Sulin, when you say tragic character, I think part of it with Sulin is what you do realize watching it is that, by the time somebody finally says to her, you can't sing. Yeah, she doesn't believe it, but it's not just because she's delusional or whatever. It's that up until now, nobody at this point has told her she can't, right? Mm-hmm. She gets up and she sings at this bar like every other person in Nashville, hoping they, it's the same way, how many of us have taken jobs on film sets or for barely functioning websites or anything like that, where it's like, yeah, buddy, we will absolutely let you write about this movie for zero pay because we think you just got the goods. And you, like a doe-eyed fool, are like, well, golly, somebody thinks I can do this? Okay. We've all done it, right? And I think that what Sulin represents is the trade-off that one has to make, right? That she just sees it as well, this is the cost of doing business, right? I want to make it, I want to do something. And you don't necessarily realize how often this system exists to exploit people who you tell them this is the cost of doing business, but they really can't do anything.
And it's also just fucking because we've had so much time with these fucking people, we know the tragedy of her dreams aren't even worth having. Nope. She's not going to be happy if she gets what she wants because everyone is miserable in this life. They're all drunk or druggies or their marriages are falling apart or this, that, or the other. Which is counterpointed with what's her name? Albuquerque, the one who starts singing at the end after Barbara Jean gets shot. She's been running around Nashville, running from her husband. Oh, I'm going to be a big star. And she finally gets her big moment to sing. And it's like, oh, she's actually good. But the whole time you're going, yeah, we only know this because someone just got fucking assassinated and nobody really cares. And that's the industry these people want to get into. And one of them probably will, but the other one is going to keep degrading herself and not get in. So it's the messiness of just like, this all sucks. This is all just bad. America sucks.
Then the question is she going to? Because what she really wants is to be on stage with Barbara Jean. She wants to be like Barbara Jean. She sings Barbara Jean songs. And then there she is, her back pressed up against a column, watching Barbara Jean get shot.
Yeah, but you know what?
Maybe
She's like,
killed, maybe not. We don't
maybe
know.
not.
And then pointedly, but I would say pointedly, she wants her opportunity to sing, right?
Yeah.
That's all she wants. And yet, in the aftermath of Barbara Jean getting shot and Henry Gibson going, somebody sing. She doesn't do it. The only person that does it is Albuquerque, who is, depending on how you read her, either a wide-eyed optimist or just fucking nuts.
Yeah.
She's just, and I think you have to read fucking nuts, because one thing I love, I listen to the soundtrack a lot, right? And the soundtrack version of the ending song that I'm so used to is her, and she's singing, and at one point the line she tosses off is, the dead people don't feel no pain, to try and comfort people. And I have that so drilled into my head that I always forget when you're watching it. Instead, she's just going, we die. Nothing gonna be on our graves but fly swatters with red dots on them. And you just have to really hear, what is she saying? This person is out of their mind. You just picked a vagrant to get up and sing, and everyone's singing along with her just because the song is catchy. It's truly baffling.
Yeah, I mean, she's got to be crazy, because we spent she's fucking almost like a goddamn cartoon character in a Hanna-Barbera short, always running away from her husband. Oh, Albuquerque, what are you doing? And she just sprints off through the wall. And it's like, and then what does she do? Someone just gets fucking shot, and she just decides, this is my moment. At least you got to give Sue Lin the good credit of being like, well, somebody did get shot. She's still probably enough of a dope that she'll try to keep doing this dream of hers, but at least she's not fucking crazy, which is probably why Albuquerque will be successful, because you have to be fucking crazy to be in this industry. I mean, Jesus Christ, Haven got shot, and he was so more focused on the political aspects of all this and not ruining the good time and his good opportunity, that he's just like, oh, get somebody to sing. Come on. Oh, yeah, I'm bleeding. It's fine. Whatever. Yeah, okay, great.
But here's my question. Is that why he reacts that way? There's so much of this that you can read into, right?
Well, yeah.
I look at that, and then Andrew, please tell me what you think. I look at that as him, he gets shot, because there's that line that I'm obsessed with, when he just goes, this isn't Dallas, it's Nashville. Right?
Yeah.
Where, because his wife is obsessed with Kennedy.
Yep.
And Kennedy getting shot, right? And you almost get this, because Kennedy gets shot in Dallas, right? They're obsessed with Kennedy. You almost get this sense that Nashville, for him, is a bubble. And he believes, if I could make everything like this, because remember early on, he yells at the piano player, who was actually the guy who co-wrote the music for most of the film. And he goes, get your hair cut. This isn't how we, you shouldn't belong
Frog.
in Nashville.
Yeah, right.
And he goes, get your hair cut. You don't belong in Nashville. And then immediately the welcome to Nashville sign. But he goes, you don't belong in Nashville. He's very particular about Nashville and the rules of Nashville, right? I think when he gets, he's getting offered governorship, all that. I think when he gets shot, there is this idea all of a sudden in that moment of, well, no, you've broken my beautiful America. You've broken, this is a presage of all of that, like, Tea Party, real America, rah-rah shit, right? Where it's like, well, no one's, this stuff doesn't happen here. Those things don't happen here. And I think that I don't even know if he's thinking about his political ambitions anymore. I think there's a chance that he might not be political anymore, because getting shot all of a sudden makes him go, oh fuck. If I run for office, I no longer have the safety of being, I go on stage at the Opry and everybody's nice and cheers for me, Anyway, Andrew, what's your read on?
It's such an interesting read that, I think the amazing, brilliant, thing about this movie is that you could read the ending in 15 different ways. And so what I think, like, what one of the kind of thorough lines that runs throughout the entire movie is just, well, literally the entire movie is Nashville is a town that's based on performing. Everybody is performing. Everybody is, it's right to what one of the most beautiful scenes or extended stretches in the movie is the two kind of dual church scenes, right, where everyone is performing. In the gospel choir, and then Barbara Jean, in the hospital. Everybody, they're never off, right? They are always on in some way, in the dive bars and, at the Parthenon, whatever. And so when, Haven's like very first inclination, even before he says this isn't Dallas, even before he goes to check, oh shit, I've been shot, is to your point before, is like, keep it going, keep the performance going. And that's what I think is like, in the audience kind of, for maybe like 30 seconds, they're like, oh, something weird just happened. But they never give it the magnitude that, a moment like that deserves. Yeah. They don't flee the scene. They just kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird, right? And, once they bring down Kenny and it kind of resolves itself in the matter of a minute or two. Albuquerque's on stage and they're just back to performing. And the crowd is back to performing because that is like what this town is based on. And so, yes, I kind of like get your read on like Haven's bubble bursting, but to me it always seemed like, well, the very most important thing in this guy's life for his entire life, for the entirety of his town's existence, has just been about performing. And because that is like the chief export of the town, that is like what their economy is based on. It's like kind of how their lives operate. It's performance. And so that's an incredibly cynical way, I think, of reading the ending too, is like, well, back to what the only thing that we know, right? Yeah. There's this like temporary distraction, but like it's getting in the way of like a good show,
Well, you know
so,
what it,
yeah,
you know what it made me think of too, and I don't know how much this is clicking for you, Andrew. I know Tom will. What it made me think of this time around watching it, and I this is a may sound like a silly thing to bring up. I was weirdly thinking of Owen Hart, the wrestler.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The famous situation where, for people who don't know, Owen Hart was a wrestler and at some pay-per-view show, he was being lowered from a carabiner that broke. He fell many feet, died at the show.
And the show went on.
The show went on. These guys were still performing around this guy's blood.
Yeah,
right?
The mat was still stained with his blood.
Yeah. And it was insanely fucked up, and it should not have happened, right? But like you mentioned, Andrew, the idea was the show would go on, and not only did the show go on, it was a very Cardi mentality, right? It wasn't just, the show goes on because, we got to honor his memory. It was, well, otherwise we have to refund people, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's almost the same thing here, right? A thing that I mean, that's kind of, you almost see it at the beginning with the Sulin scene with the donors, right? Where they throw this big party to try and raise money for Walker. And when she doesn't strip, Ned Beatty's whole attitude is like, no, she has to go down there. Otherwise, this looks bad on me.
Right.
It's Hispanic. I also want to point out, you mentioned like they tackle Kenny and then, everybody's applauding. Another thing I didn't notice until this time around is Altman, before the thing starts, before the the campaign event starts, we see all of the cop cars show up, right? We start with the cop cars before anybody performs. And then we do not see the cops again until well after the shooting, when everybody's singing. Only then do the cops bother to walk through the crowd, which just feels like a real pointed move from Altman.
Well, that's not relevant to anything that's happened in the news this week.
A move that's aged incredibly well, right? Like, which I guess look, this is a very obvious point to make too, but in watching it again, like I kind of had to do some math. So this predated Lennon's assassination by 5 years.
Lennon,
and I know that Altman's kind of talked about how he was sort of, I think people initially even like blamed him perhaps for Lennon's assassination, but just watching this, it is eerie, right? Like, in which it's eerie just how there's like, knowing what we know now in like the resulting 40 years after this. This was probably one of the last like moments where something like that was a surprise, but kind of just like, man, it's just something that kind of happened that was weird, to your point, to the Owen Hart thing, right? Where now it's like, it's just a part of our everyday lives. But I don't quite know the point that I'm trying to make, but it is jarring to see the nonchalance, in that moment, especially knowing what we know now.
Well, it's just jarring to see any movie from 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40, whatever the fuck, as many years ago, where you could just see that a filmmaker just had their finger on the pulse of what America really is, and usually those movies never succeed because this country does not like to see its ugly truths laid bare in such clear fashion. They go, "Oh, it's a movie, it's bullshit. This guy's just a fucking commie. He's an asshole, whatever." And then, like we just made the point, like we just saw a guy light himself on fire in front of the Israeli fucking embassy, and what did the cops do? They stared at him with their guns drawn, as an EMT was like, "I don't need guns, I need a fucking fire extinguisher." And you just go,
it's
guys, like, I don't know.
But the thing that Altman does so well in this film, I think, because Tom, you mentioned like, oh, we don't want to look at ourselves. One of the problems I think with a lot of political films or politically inclined art is that they exist only to talk to their ideological audience, right?
Yeah,
people show up to be told they're doing right.
They're speaking to the converted.
Right. Now, Altman and all of his team, they said, part of the reason people were hostile to them down there, we were all liberals. They were not. They loved Nixon. We did not. So it would have been very easy for this movie to only be critical of the establishment. But there's a pointed thing, which is, you mentioned like, oh, you would have thought, watching the movie, you'd think Scott Glenn would shoot her, right? Mm-hmm. Instead, Scott Glenn takes Kenny down, right? Scott Glenn is a good guy in this movie. When we're first introduced to him, the guy who you would think for the counterculture would be our hero, Keith Carradine, looks at this soldier and just goes, "Hey, did you kill anybody this week?" And then it turns out what? Keith Carradine's a prick with no principles. Yeah. And Scott Glenn is just a decent guy, right?
Well, there's 2 points to like exactly. Well, 1 point to what you're saying about the political stuff, but one thing about Scott Glenn that really hit me this time is that it feels like Scott Glenn is kind of him, Altman, really reflecting on Vietnam and how, because his whole story, he says, "Oh, my Barbara Jean was in a fire and my mom's the one who pulled her out, and like blah blah blah. I'm here to kind of like make sure she's okay." And he fails at his job.
Yes,
just like the Vietnam veterans, they went over to do a thing and they didn't do it. They failed and they had to come back to their failure. And he doesn't, and like you said, he doesn't make him a bad guy. No. He gets it. He is insulted by Keith Carradine, and we see Keith Carradine's a bigger piece of shit than him. Scott Glenn may be ineffective, but he's not a bad guy.
And
but,
he likes Keenan Wynn.
Yeah, he was very nice to Keenan Wynn. But
when Shelley Duvall, the counterculture girl, was not.
Shelley Duvall, big old bitch in that movie.
Yeah.
What's the Tom's other group mates? What is it? Mary and
Bill and Mary.
Bill, Mary, and Tom. Okay. When Michael Moriarty goes to Bill and Michael Moriarty, that's a very different energy. I would love to see him in Nashville, by the way. If you've ever seen Q the Winged Serpent, you wish he was in this movie. When Michael Murphy goes to them and he's trying to pitch them to go to play at the rally, and they're like, "Oh, well, Mary's like, oh, well, we're registered Democrats, so why would we even do that?" And then Bill's just like, "Oh, well, we're only registered Democrats because your father's a registered Democrat." Yeah. Well, you just get to see like, oh, right, a lot of these people will fucking just bend their political whims if they can get a paycheck or exposure from it. And you just go, right. He doesn't like a single fucking person in this movie, except for maybe Scott Glenn and yet, Sue Lin.
And by the way, with that scene, something I Murphy talked about in the documentary, they were shooting the scene, right? Which had a lot of improvisation or whatever. And basically Murphy is standing next to Altman at the monitor, and Altman says, "I'm going to push you when it's your time to interrupt them." Right? Like, he's going to let them argue and bicker, and then he's going to push Murphy when it's time to go in. Murphy's watching the scene, and all of a sudden has this thought where he leans over to Altman and he goes, "Bob, I have an idea. What if I'm into her? What if I come in and I'm this straight-laced guy who's like, into the flower power chick and all that," and he's trying to make his case for it. And it becomes clear Altman is not listening to him and just goes, "Yeah, fine, whatever, do it," and shoves him. And that's the scene they went with. Because Murphy kind of, as he's watching it, got the energy of like, right, maybe part of the vibe here should not just be that Bob is a sellout, but also that Murphy is, right? That they're
Yeah.
all without principle. I mean, that's, I don't know. That is one of the beauties of, I mean, this movie has 24 core characters, arguably, right? In fact, you know what?
Yeah.
That's a good way to ask this, just to make this point. And I know this may be tough, so take some time to think about it. What is everyone's kind of, on this watch, what was your kind of favorite character story arc? What was the thing that really worked for you this time around? And we'll start with Andrew. You are our guest. I'll let you have the floor.
Oh my god, I love it. So Opal was the funniest, right? And I wonder, again, it was ages ago that, you know, I had seen it and probably was hungover from the morning before in 2006. So who knows, right? If I felt the same way all those years ago, but boy, almost every line that she had, intentionally so, was just incredible. Goldblum, it's time to talk about Goldblum at some point, right?
Yeah,
is this his first role? Probably.
No.
No.
No, because he was in California Split the year before.
Oh, okay.
He was in Death Wish.
Yeah, he's in
Death Wish was like 72, I think.
And then Lily Tomlin, Linnea, I think is her character name. Who I also, maybe this was her first movie role.
First movie, yeah.
She and Henry Gibson are both coming off of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
Yeah.
And do you know the story about her getting this movie?
Yeah, it's because somebody couldn't, because was it
Louise Fletcher?
Louise Fletcher,
had to turn it down. Either turned it down or Altman decided to go with somebody else.
It was that Louise Fletcher and Altman got into a personal dispute.
Yeah, so
but
he fired her
is based on Louise Fletcher's family.
Yeah, because she is the child of deaf parents. So Lily Tomlin gets the role. But funnily enough, Lily Tomlin was up for the Nurse Ratched role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which gave the opening for Louise Fletcher to get it, and pretty much worked out for everybody involved.
Yeah,
so
I'd say so. I actually think that her character was like maybe weirdly the most sympathetic on this rewatch, and and she, like, there was like a purity to her, even though, you know, she cheats on her husband, and
for good reason.
Totally right, piece of shit.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think like arguably like the most tender moment of the movie is the minute or two when she's, you know, communicating with her deaf children and kind of teaching them how to sing, and just a really beautiful woman. And I kind of found myself drawn to her, even though like her introduction is arguably one of the funniest moments of the film too, where you know, Opal's asking like, well, who's that? And, well, that's our lawyer's wife, right? And like the all black gospel choir behind her, and of course she is like, again, just purely cynical, but you root for someone like her.
Even just the fact that in bed with Keith Carradine, she's able to get a little bit of humanity out of him when she's like showing him how to sign, and you see a little bit of something in there from him that he immediately shuts off and calls another girlfriend.
Yeah, well, she escapes to I forget whose point it was before, but she escapes with dignity. She escapes with her agency, which is probably the first time, you know, maybe in Tom's philanderer career that has maybe ever happened. So yeah, I found her kind of magnetic the whole time. Obviously, it's Lily Tomlin, but just like maybe the best drawn character. And I think she was one of two who got nominated. Am I spoiling?
Don't spoil the game.
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Whoopsie.
Well, okay. You can kick me off.
No, that's fine. Now we just have to see.
But it makes sense, right? But it makes sense. Because I think that she probably had the best arc and perhaps, you know, the most nuance there.
But, you know, because we said before that everybody's a piece of shit and Altman kind of hates them. I do actually think he likes her, and he understands why she would, you know, cheat, because he at least lets her have so much of the runtime like not doing it,
right?
That the moment when she finally does, it's like Mike said, the Sulin scene is the nexus point of the movie. She cheats, and then we see why it's not the biggest problem that she cheats, because her husband's a fat, sweaty fucking creep sneaking around back alleys.
Right, and we probably she's like among the more like interior characters in the movie too, where
Yeah.
we really do spend some time inside our head, which you can't always say for the other folks. And
you see that with, I think too, this is where Tewksbury really shines, Joan Tewksbury, because you see that she put a lot of effort into giving interiority to Barbara Jean and to Lily Tomlin. And Tomlin, to her credit, I mean, one of the most extraordinary things she does is during I'm Easy, which is one of the best scenes in the film. You know, I'm not saying anything crazy. It's that during I'm Easy, you know, we focus on Opal, we focus on Mary, we focus on Lily. Mary is sitting in a feeling, right? Which is she's married to Bob, but she's she's sleeping with Tom, right? Opal is sitting in a feeling, which is I slept with this guy. He might be singing to me. I don't know what's going on. Tomlin, with just how much she opens or closes her mouth, she's not even moving her eyes, is taking you on a ride where you really are watching her deal with a lot with just the most little that she's doing on her face. Now with Opal, you know, Andrew, you mentioned Opal. Opal is a ostensibly a journalist, a writer who rambles a lot, fills her writing in her little tape recorder with a lot of flowery prose that is just unnecessary about meaningless bullshit like school buses. As an editor, could you imagine having to edit somebody whose writing is so full of rambling, unnecessary flowery prose?
Couldn't be
nightmare. Would be a nightmare.
No.
Opal's the kind of person who gets assigned 2,000 words and turns in 6,000. Could you imagine what a nightmare that would be?
Like the nameless writer in this hypothetical scenario, it is always better to have a lot more to work with than less. And I would say the same thing with Opal. I also just wanted to, I know that I'm naming every character in the movie, but lastly, just, you know, Hal Walker, right? Like you never see the guy, but is arguably the one that you probably hear the most in the movie. I think that's not even arguable. Just firing on all cylinders every time we hear the public address in just that omnipresent van that goes back and forth and all up and down throughout Nashville. And I think he is, you know, arguably like in many ways, like in the same way that I think Altman said, every character is in love with Barbara Jean. Is that what the quote is? That it all sort of pivots around Barbara Jean and it pivots around Walker. And I don't think that's, you know, that's a pretty obvious thing to say, but so, yeah, I'd say those four kind of, I guess Goldblum included, were just like, could not look away anytime or listen away.
What I love about Walker too, especially this time around watching it, is the realization that the ride of hearing Walker talk is akin to kind of what we all felt in the 2000s anytime the Daily Show or the Colbert Report would bring on some fringe politician. Like when Ron Paul would do the Colbert Report, and at first he'll start talking and be like, well, you know, the government is spending too much on wars. And you'd be like, yeah, I can ride with this guy. And then he goes, and that's why we have to defund UNICEF. And you're like, wait, what the fuck is this guy doing? And that's Walker, because sometimes the car will go by and he'll be like, you know, Americans are paying too much money for war. And you're like, yeah. And then he'll go, Christopher Columbus paid less for his boat than you pay for a car. What the fuck is that? Like he'll just say shit.
Back to, did this movie invent podcasting, right? Like, I feel like, you know, I don't know if you guys ever do solo pods, but this is just the deranged ramblings of a man who's been left alone in a room with a podcast mic. And just, that's all you hear throughout the movie. And just soundtracking. I mean, like the pile up in the movie on the highway is probably my favorite scene, maybe like my favorite extended.
It's great. And all along, I love that there's two comical car accidents in the movie.
Yes. Oh, I know. It's very good.
And neither one is the best comical car crash in a Henry Gibson movie.
No, but this was a good warm up.
Do you not, Andrew? Have you forgotten? He's an Illinois Nazi. Blues Brothers.
Oh my God.
Even it's in Blues Brothers. He's the Illinois Nazi.
Holy moly. Yeah. Oh my God. My God, you're right. Yeah. Just the car crashes, right? I keep on coming back to the word chaotic, but it's almost a little too on the nose that you know, this pure kind of distillation of chaos is just very emblematic of what Altman's whole thing is. I mean, especially in this movie, but
it's very James Joyce, right? Like that's kind of humor. It's also, and I know Tom's going to hate this comparison, but Tom, even you'll have to back me on this one. It's very Godard in that one scene, right? the car crash with the audio still playing and all of these characters reacting. It's very like 60s Godard, right?
Well, no, I would disagree because this scene is good. And we all know Godard has never filmed a good scene in his life. And we are all much better off that he's roasting in hell.
That's not... Jesus. Hey, listen. That's not... You at least enjoy the Jack Palance scenes in
No!
Temp,
No!
right?
Because even... Because I hate Godard so much, he made me dislike Jack Palance.
But no, it's very joyous. It's very good. It's very like... that car crash is probably the most on-the-nose satirical the movie gets, right? Like, that's the most...
Well, it's slapstick.
Yeah.
It is hilarious.
It is straight up a scene that would be in the Blues Brothers, like we brought up the Henry, but I hadn't seen it in probably 10 years, so I forgot a lot of stuff, but just like this car accident happens, I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm more attuned into what this movie is. Like, there's going to be Blues Brothers slapstick scenes, and then there's going to be like all this other crazy shit, and so I know somebody fucking dies at the end. We're going for a ride. It's fine.
Hey, to bring it back to R.E.M. too, which is something that, we can do on a podcast. Everybody Hurts, another great, multi-car pileup scene on a freeway. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
Listen, I could even go more obscure, because when I think of Everybody Hurts now, I think of Mission Hill, the forgotten one season long animated series.
Yeah,
were you
absolutely
a Mission Hill guy? Okay, good.
I remember. I certainly couldn't quote it probably as deeply as.
Were you a Mission Hill guy?
Yeah.
There are times where I truly hate being your friend. Tom,
can I tell you though? This is one of the only situations where that question can be asked with confidence.
Wait, Mike, the last time that we saw each other, I feel like we just went for a solid minute or two just naming old from that era, like Fox and UPN kind of sitcom, like Shasta McNasty.
Yes.
And
Greg the
Gary and Mike.
Yeah.
Which one?
Gary and Mike.
Gary, I don't what's Gary and Mike?
Claymation dude bro show.
Okay.
You know what was on at the bar the other day, Mike? The PJs.
That project,
because that ran long enough to get syndication.
Yeah,
that ran a couple seasons.
That unlocked the magic 80 episodes.
Yeah.
Upon rewatch, so I feel like I kind of commandeered that.
Mike, who's your favorite character this time?
Yeah, who did you guys vibe with the most?
This time around, it really was Henry Gibson for me. It really was Haven. He was like a side character every other time I watched it. But it was, number one, it was now knowing that Henry Gibson helped create this character, because he was very politically active, and he was very liberal, right? But he was very politically active. So he's like, I know the kind of guy I want to skewer. And I do think, the reason I have the read I do now of when he gets shot is that there is something about, again, he's Nashville. He's Mr. Nashville, right? He's doing this party on his compound. Elliot Gould shows up, Julie Christie, whatever. And he starts glad-handing with them, right? He starts being, okay, maybe I could be Mr. Hollywood, Maybe I could be Mr., celebrity in a bigger way, right? There's that great moment when it's, when he turns to go, Elliot Gould, oh, he's a movie star. Oh, bring him here. Bring him over here. All of that.
Right.
Where he's starting to think, like, maybe I can get... Even when, they're talking to him, they go, well, Walker thinks you could be a great governor, right? He's starting to think, like, maybe I can expand beyond I'm a big fish in a small pond, but maybe I can expand beyond my kingdom. Watching him go through those machinations, right? And the fact that his wife is there consistently just talking about Kennedy. The fact that, like, I don't think that Henry Gibson thinks or knows that he's craven. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't think he's even that craven in the movie, right? I think he is a guy who is... I don't think he's a grifter yet. I think he is a guy who is dabbling in, walking up to the line of being, like, right-wing political grifter type, or left-wing, but, right-wing political grifter type, who, because of this moment, because of this gunshot and everything, is like, oh, no, maybe I'm just gonna sit this, like, how many politicians do you know, or how many celebrities do you know who would be like, I think I might run for office. I think I might
5 personally.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden are like, oh, you know what? Never mind. Maybe I'm just not going to do that.
I don't want to leave this part of the conversation without talking about the compound that Haven and
Yes.
Lady Pearl. You know whose house that is? I'm sure you guys have read the trivia
I actually
too.
don't know.
That's Altman's house.
Oh,
that
really?
Is Altman's house in Nashville. Yeah.
No shit.
Which was, I would just love to spend the entirety of the movie there because boy, Elliot Gould shows up. Julie Christie's there. Yeah. One thing I wanted to bring up too, before we kind of move away from Gould, is like one of the notes that I kind of were taking last night when I was watching this again was just like I was kind of like looping all the outsiders together in this movie and kind of what they all meant and each perspective that they had, including Elliot Gould, right? Like, and it just sort of kind of an interesting experiment to see this community from their perspective. And so, I mean, I wrote down like Opal, obviously very like she is not of this country, let alone of this scene. Kenny, right, is coming from, I forget where they say Kenny's from. But Triplet obviously has deep kind of disdain and cynicism for this entire town and scene. L.A. Joan, obviously it's right in her name. And Elliot Gould and Julie Christie, right? But those were sort of like the main six. I just thought it was kind of interesting to loop those outsiders together. And I was curious, if you guys kind of made the same, had the same takeaway there and like what we think those characters are trying to say, or if it's just like interesting adding to the sauce.
I will say before you even get into that, one thing that struck me as very odd is when I'm watching the documentary, Joan Tewksbury says something about Opal that I never even thought about.
What's that?
Which is she goes, Opal, like she's going around telling everybody she's with the BBC so she can get into things, and that's a joke. And even though I've watched this movie a number of times, that was the first time I went, oh, she's not from the BBC.
Yeah, because I think she calls it by the wrong name too. I believe, right? She calls it the British Broadcasting Company. Whatever the C is, that's not the actual C.
I don't think I ever consciously thought it, but I feel like as you're watching it, you're just like, well, she's clearly not acting like a reporter. Yeah. And I know the BBC has a much better reputation than a lot of reporters in America. So this feels kind of pointed.
And do we think, let's say she was legit a BBC reporter. I mean, what was her cover to be there? To kind of attend the Walker rally or infiltrate the Nashville scene? Like, what was the...
I mean, the thing I will say to that and why I always believe that is there are a surprising amount of British, BBC news reports that are literally just, so check out what these Americans do. Like, you would be amazed how many things are literally just like them showing up and going, now here they eat a thing called pizza. And you're just like, fucking whatever.
Yeah.
When you mentioned the thing about the outsiders, Andrew, part of that, they talk about on the, in the documentary that one of the things that was so interesting about visiting Nashville for, Tewksbury and so on was the idea of like, this was a place where young people were still doing there what they used to do in Hollywood or New York City 50 plus years ago, which is young people can show up with a dream, with a couple dollars in their pocket, and I wrote a song, and hope to make it on stage at the Opry, right? And I do think, in a way, what's happening in Nashville with all of these people coming, right? All of these people coming to Nashville to try and make it or to try and make some kind of move, right? Is that for a brief second, Nashville is the hot new town. Mm-hmm. It's the untapped area. New York has already been played out. LA's played out, right? This is something new. This is something untouched. I don't want to say, because obviously it's not in the traditional sense like becoming gentrified or anything like that, right? But you're starting to see outside influence leak in, right? This used to be this used to be its own little thing, right? I mean, obviously the Grand Ole Opry is broadcast on radios and shit like that, but it's its own kind of community, right? And you can still hear that today. People talk about that, right? That it's one of those places
it's still happened. Yeah, Nashville is one of those places people talk about now. Like, oh well, Austin's done and this place is done. Nashville's the new place, and you go, guys, we've done this before. What the fuck already? Like, enough.
I think Ben Shapiro lives in Nashville now too, for what it's worth. I think a lot of his grifters.
Well, yeah, that's where all those right-wing grifters have started, moving to, because
What are your characters? Oh,
yeah. Who are your guys?
All right,
To quote Mark
who are you
Maron,
guys? Who are you guys? Pow! I just shit my pants. All right, so this time out, I mentioned before Scott Glenn and his whole arc, and how I kind of put it together. The Vietnam aspect of it really hit me, especially because Scott Glenn's a great actor, and I feel like he's been underrated his whole life, his whole career, and just his look at the end when she gets shot, and how just heartbroken and dejected it is as he's walking through the crowd is fucking. It's emotional. It gets to you. Like it's just, I mean, it's kind of perfect. He's a great little part to the movie, a great little seasoning that gives it, that full flavor. But for me, the one I really came out of this time is Barbara Jean. I think Barbara Jean and her whole story, I mean, it really is the perfect centerpiece for the whole dark, cynical thing that this movie is doing, because she's not a bad person. She seems like a sweet, nice lady who is living through abject hell at every aspect of her life, escaped a fire, clearly has mental health issues because her husband said, "Are you having another goddamn mental breakdown?" She starts rambling on stage in front of people, and everyone just starts going, what the fuck is happening? And you feel bad. She's not doing anything wrong. She's not mean. She's not craven. She's none of this. She's a decent person who's getting chewed up and spit out by this system where no one really cares about her health. It's just, all right, well, she'll do the rally, but she better be up first so we can get her out early. That doesn't help, buddy. She still has to perform in front of people. Your wife is not okay. And maybe this is like a fucked up take to say, but maybe it's kind of a mercy that Kenny shoots her at the end and kind of ends her misery, because she's not she's not happy. She's not going to be happy because it's just gonna get worse. Like that's the fucked up, beautiful, cynical stew that this man has made, which is, look at this nice lady. She's got a great voice. She wants to entertain people. She's a go-getter, and she's losing her fucking mind. She was lit on fire, and nobody cares.
Was she lit on fire? Do we think that, or did she just have a nervous breakdown? Because Barnett in the hospital, during that moment where I can't remember the Connie, right? The other country singer is on the radio, and she's sort of like losing it again. And then Barnett kind of tries to talk her out of it. Like, now what do we, I forget what the exact dialogue was, but you can see that this is clearly a dance that they've kind of had before. And so I did wonder, I was like, well, the burn, Michael Jackson on the Pepsi commercial, like, that really, was that actually what happened? Or did she?
Well, you know what?
Go ahead.
It's interesting you say that. My thought has been for a while, because you also have Scott Glenn. Oh, she was saved from the burning. So my thing is, I think that what you're describing. So you're saying, was she burned? Was it a nervous breakdown? And my thought is, it's a Venn diagram, and we're talking about the center of it. Like I think this is somebody who set fires.
But you know what? Again, here's the beauty of this movie, where ambiguity, make up your own points, whatnot. To Andrew's point, if she didn't set the fire, then Scott Glenn's whole story is fake, and like Vietnam, he's in this situation under false pretenses and doesn't even succeed anyway. So there you go. I think she started the fire. I think she was in a fire. Either way, this woman is clearly not well, and she's not going to get the help she needs. And it almost feels like Kenny knows, and is like, because he doesn't shoot Walker. He doesn't shoot Haven. He doesn't shoot Sue Lin. He doesn't even, he doesn't shoot any of the black guys that are about to perform. He shoots the nicest woman in the world who had a meltdown the day before. It almost feels like maybe he kind of was doing something nice for her. And it's fucked up to say that, but.
Did Kenny come down to Nashville to assassinate Barbara Jean? Do you think that was why he came to town? Or did he always have designs to kill someone, or to become sort of a figure that like gained that notoriety? Like, that's what I was wondering about too, because I don't know if his character was like the most developed, if I'm being completely honest, and because you don't really get. And so I do wonder, like, especially when he's on the phone with his mom, like, hey, I'll be back in a couple of weeks, and so clearly he's got an idea that, like, is he pursuing some sort of infamy? What are really, like, it's his motivations are not entirely clear, which, that's like probably the point of the ending. But I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder if she was his target all along. Was it Walker? Was it because he had the opportunity to shoot and kill her at the previous day when she was at the I guess that was the Opry or on the houseboat, wherever that was.
Did he have the opportunity that day? That's what makes that scene play so well. Is he's sitting there watching Barbara Jean, right? And what happens? She starts to have the breakdown. He makes a little move, and then Scott Glenn in his full uniform gets up and stands up. And you see Kenny look at Scott Glenn, right? So you can read that scene as him going, I would have done it, but the same way that like Lee Harvey Oswald, like shot at somebody else first, right? He, it was a different political figure that he shot through his window and missed, right? That could have been the person he killed. That could have been the moment and things went awry. That scene, by the way, the scene when she's singing on the houseboat and she has the breakdown, right? There were a couple of extraordinary things in that scene that I never even noticed. One is everybody, every one of the other performers has to wear that silly uniform, right? Mm-hmm. The yellow with all the ruffles and the white gloves. But Altman pointedly, even though almost everybody else you see in that scene is a white person, he very pointedly foregrounds a black man in that outfit to hand Barbara Jean the microphone. And only when you see a black man in that outfit do you go, this is a minstrel costume. These costumes came from minstrel shows. That's why they do them. Oh God. It's like, that's where that comes from. Those costumes are from minstrel shows. Right. And by that time, by the 70s, America had realized, mostly America had realized, we can't be doing full minstrel shows now, but what if we take the parts we liked, right? It's like when you watch, people don't watch it, but when you watch White Christmas and they're like, we're doing a minstrel show, and it's all just white people in costumes. There's no blackface, but you're like, I don't know what to do with this, right?
The implication,
it's very odd. With that, so there's that. Also, this time around, I took notice that Barbara Jean's singing, and in the front row, sitting in the front row, is a clown. Never explained, never remarked on. There's just a clown clapping. So you can tell they're having fun with that. The other thing I didn't realize, Ronnie Blakely wrote that breakdown.
When she's rambling, you mean? That whole...
all they told her is Barbara Jean's going to have a breakdown. She wrote it the night before. And the only thing that Altman came in, looked at what she wrote, and Altman figured out when she's going to stop talking and start singing again. And that's all that he came up with on that. So she wrote that breakdown herself. Another person who, by the way, was not supposed to be in the movie.
Right.
Blakely was brought in to write the music.
She is unreal.
Yes,
she is incredible.
Absolutely.
Well, that's one of the funniest stories from college. I won't name the person, but me and Mike and a bunch of friends watched A Nightmare on Elm Street, and Ronnie Blakely's the mom in it. And this one guy goes, "Oh my God, she's a terrible fucking actress. Oh my God, she's awful." And I just look at him and go, "She's an Oscar-nominated actress for Nashville." And you could see him like short circuit as I tell him that. Fuck you, guy.
But she wasn't looking at the other one, and I don't know if you guys know this. It sounds like, Andrew, you did your homework, so you probably know.
A little bit. I fell down the rabbit hole last night. Yes.
David Carradine was not supposed to be in that role.
How did he wind his way into it? He was
cast as Bob, right? And he wanted to play Bob, the cuckolded husband.
Yeah. The Larry David from Fridays. That's what I kept on and I know that he's from Slapshot, but I was like, who the hell is this guy?
He looks like Benny Safdie.
Yeah, right. Like the OG Benny Safdie.
I would love both of you guys, Tom, Andrew, take a guess as who was originally cast in the Keith Carradine role in Nashville, but had to drop
Jimmy
out.
Dean.
Okay.
So that era.
Mm-hmm. He had to drop. He dropped out because he had to go shoot a TV pilot with Mark Hamill.
There's no way this is correct, but I'm going to say Robert Redford just to move on with the. Yeah,
Andrew, I gotta say
Dreamboat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I hear you on Dreamboat, but what if how Robert Redford, after his Dreamboat period, aged gracefully and has become a totally normal dude who everyone likes?
Yeah.
This guy,
Gary Busey.
There it is.
Oh,
it is.
Okay. Well, so I wanted to bring up. Okay. Well, let's talk about Gary Busey because he, for some reason that I don't know the story, so maybe you can fill us in, wrote what I think is the best song in the movie, which is Since You've Gone, that they perform at Exit In before Tom sings I'm Easy.
Yeah.
Which I think that song is like actually incredible. The harmonies on that are unreal. But I was looking, I was like, oh, this song's incredible. Gary Busey just like straight up just wrote that song with the other three in the band. So yeah, what's the story here?
He was Tom, right? He was cast as Tom.
He was.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then he had to drop out to make a pilot. He dropped out to make a pilot with Mark Hamill. Then Altman went to Keith Carradine and went, "You're Tom now." And Keith Carradine didn't want to do it because he went, "This guy is the opposite of me. I don't like this guy. I don't want to be this guy." And in the documentary, he goes, "And I was young and stupid enough to think it mattered as an actor whether or not you liked the guy." Because actually Nashville in part comes from when they were making Thieves Like Us. Carradine had written I'm Easy and It Don't Worry Me on the set of Thieves Like Us.
Oh,
which, by the way, fun fact, if that was the case today, none of those songs would be Oscar eligible. Because now they're very strict about it has to be written for the movie. But he wrote those two songs, and then they obviously, Altman starts building the movie around that.
Wild.
But yeah, Busey was almost there, and he dropped out. Would be a different movie. Would be a very different movie.
Energy just out of control.
It's just crazy. I feel like that's an element we need to talk about, is that he made the actors write their music.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that's a big fucking ask.
Please,
that's a big swing.
Because, like I said, I think almost about an hour of the movie, if not more, is pure performance, right? It's like it's watching the greatest concert documentary ever, right? That just so happens to be an amazing, hilarious, fucked up, chaotic movie, right? But like, just blew me away. To your point, Tom, that these were all originals and the actors wrote them all. Now, I know that some of the actors are musicians first, right, which makes sense. But even
that's still like a big ask, like because you get a musician and be like, oh, write a song for the movie and the song's good, but they fucking suck as an actor. Or you get an actor that's got a good voice, but they can't write music. So it's just like all these things that could go wrong.
Now I was wondering about this too. So because I think the songs sound great and the performances are phenomenal. Do we think the songs are actually good? And I think I wonder if that's why Altman was like, now let's have the actors write what they think are these like country gospel standards.
Well, I would say,
and as it turns out, not all of these songs are. I mean, I would argue even a majority of them are not that good. They're performed excellently, but they kind of suck, right? Like the lyrics are super hokey. Even more, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I would say I think what works about having the actors write them is that the songs are written in character, right? Mm-hmm. Like 200 Years, or For the Sake of the Children, the Henry Gibson songs, right? They are, whether or not they're good songs, they are exactly the kind of songs that guy would have made a hit, right?
And
how many,
it's the right kind of satirical music, which is, it does sound like what they're making fun of, but not in like a walk hard way where it's like, very obviously just like
silly.
I don't know. Right? Some of the songs where it's just like they're puns and it's just like wink wink, we're making fun of it. It's like if you're not really versed in this world, you just hear it like me, because I don't like this shit. Except for Johnny Cash, which thank God they didn't take Johnny Cash to task in this movie. It just sounds like this stuff. And
I mean, they're great pastiches, right? Like I think.
Well, yeah, that's it.
Mission accomplished. Yeah.
Yeah, I think mission accomplished, and it sounds like what it needs to sound like, which is close enough. But if you dig a little deeper, you realize, oh, this is dumb. They all think this is all dumb.
But I think with that, like it Don't Worry Me is the perfect song for the fact that it is. You know what? It's akin to. And this is going to be a bit of it's It Don't Worry Me is It's a Small World After All, right?
Right.
They are a song that is in a cycle that is enough to get sick. My partner came home while I was watching the movie, and she only saw the ending, right? It was
at what point did it start?
She walked in while Barbara Jean was singing My Idaho Home, A moment that every time I watch it, I start to get tension in my chest because I'm just like, I know what's coming.
You know what's coming.
So she comes in and sits down. I'm texting Tom, going like, she's gonna have no idea what's going on. The song starts, whatever. The movie ends, and I'm talking about, it's my favorite ending of any movie, and I'll talk more about why later. But like, it's my favorite ending of a movie. And she just goes, "Yeah, I didn't even watch the movie, and that song is stuck in my head. It's very catchy." And I'm like, that's the perfect thing, because it's a good song insofar as it's catchy and you can clap along with it and everything. Is it great songwriting? No, but it works for that moment. And there's so much in this movie.
Well, it's the That Thing You Do test, right? That Thing You Do, for context, is my all-time favorite movie and my all-time favorite song.
Okay.
But it is always the barometer by which you measure every fake song in every TV show or movie.
Absolutely.
And exactly to your point, like, is this song a believable of its time, of its era? Is it a good song that sticks with you, right? Is it not like, it's not, it doesn't veer into walk hard territory, right? It just sounds like a brilliant pastiche, like so many of these do, that really kind of just, it's authentic, right? Like it helps with the authenticity, because I think when you're watching this for the first time, you think a lot of these just are standards. And then like the more that you're kind of listening to them, they're a little bit more modern maybe than they seem, right? And then they kind of just like, oh, well, these are, actually kind of hokey. So you were...
And that's why the Tom and Bill stuff, the Tom, Bill, and Mary stuff works so... Bob, right? Tom, Bob, Mary, right?
Bill,
it is Bill, right?
Bill.
Tom, Bill, and Mary stuff works so well because there's one key line when Michael Murphy is talking to Bill, right? Which is, Michael Murphy's trying to talk about the event, right, that they're throwing. And he goes, this redneck music is pretty popular right now. I got a lot of local yokels on the bill. And Bill goes, so we'll be the only rock group there, right?
Yeah.
That Bill thinks of them as a rock group, right? And even now, even today, how many country artists or crossover artists or anything like that, even though they get their start in country, right? Or it doesn't have to be country either, How many, let's face it, how many white guys get their start in like rap and hip hop? And then they start making real money and they go, I'm a pop artist, right? I'm a pop artist. No, don't, No. What are you talking about? Post Malone? I've always been a pop artist. What are you talking about? That.
Why the fuck did he sing at the Super Bowl? That was the weirdest shit in the world.
Who sang at the Super Bowl? Was it Post Malone?
Post Malone.
Yeah, he sang the
Star Spangled Banner.
Guys,
America the Beautiful.
Yeah,
one of them. I don't fucking know.
That's what you guys saw. I saw SpongeBob sing "Sweet Victory." So we had very different Super Bowls, is what I'm saying.
We did have very different Super Bowls. That was very on brand for you. The only way it could have been better is if you got like a fucking branded sandwich from like a Victim-owned branded sandwich from Jimmy John's.
I want to hear more about this later. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, all right. Well, let's get into the ending then. You just said it's your favorite ending of all time. Let's get what makes it your favorite ending of all time.
So I talked about this on our Duck Soup episode, which is when I was very young. Like when I was, a kid in the Bush era, and everything was feeling chaotic. That like I try and talk to people all the time about like that weird post 9/11 blur where all of pop culture was just chaos. Like if you watch movies, music, TV, anything from 2003 to about 2006, all of media seems to be going, I don't know what to do. I just fucking, what do you guys want? Like we, it's very, very weird. And it continues to, like 2008 is such a watershed moment, not just, for cinema and for everything. Cause it all of a sudden, like everybody
Phillies
just seemed
won the
to
World
go,
Series. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Boo.
Sorry.
So we have, believe me, trust me, we could do a full hour of just you and Tom doing New York Philly rivalry. I'm all for it. But right now.
All right. Next time.
Let's brawl. But when I was young and I watched Duck Soup, the Fredonia's going to war, all God's children's got guns ending song really clicked for me because this was at the time, people forget this because obviously it was long enough, but I think we all kind of remember like at peak, like Iraq war kicking off, there were serious conversations going around of like, they might start a draft again. Who knows?
Oh my God.
They might.
It was like a fear. We're all around the same age. It was like that little fear in the back, like, oh, when we're 18, it's going to be, absolutely.
Yeah. Literally just terrifying. Right. So that was my thing for a while. And then when I watched Nashville for the first time, that ending sort of supplanted Duck Soup for me. For now, Tom always talks about like whenever like the world is getting too crazy, whenever something happens, whenever an election goes a certain way or anything, he thinks of the ending of In the Mouth of Madness with
yeah, baby, Sam Neill.
Sam Neill sitting there watching the movie screen and just laughing. This is that for me, right? Because that ending of it's not just them singing "It Don't Worry Me" and the crowd cheering. There's this one shot of Michael Murphy walking the one way, and then we catch as Ned Beatty's going the other, and it's like everybody's scrambling around and doesn't really know what to do, right?
Just defeated, but yeah, exactly.
And yet, what are the lyrics, right? "It don't worry me," right? You may, and then that pointed line where she's singing with the most gusto. "You may say I ain't free. It don't worry me." And you're like, well, that's fuck me. Does that really work? Yeah. When you're just like truly like, it doesn't matter what pops up on the news when they'll be like, a bunch of people got tear gassed outside of a church during a protest. And you're like, it don't worry me. It's like you really just, there is a level of despondence. And part of that is because, and I alluded to this before, I touched on it, but like this and his, subsequent film Buffalo Bill and the Indians is Robert Altman responding to the Bicentennial. We had just dealt with Watergate, right? We had just dealt with Vietnam. The early 70s is a period where America sucks in most people's eyes, right? Like, no matter what you think, you're just like, Jesus, this is bad, right? Whether you think America is bad because of Nixon or whether you think America is bad because of the failed George McGovern campaign and the 68 Democratic Convention, everybody is like, oh, this place is falling apart, right? And Gerald Ford is going, the State of the Union is not good, and all of that. And yet all of a sudden somebody turns around and goes, we're 200 years old. And everybody puts all of that on the back burner and just goes, hell yeah, break out the flags.
Hell yeah, brother.
Right. It's truly wild. And so Altman, there's a reason why I love that opening number too, is that the biting satire in the wake of everything, right? That there's Henry Gibson singing the song about going to war, right? And weird lines like, I saw action in Algiers, where you're like, why? You shouldn't have been there.
How old is this dude? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You shouldn't have been there. And then I pray to God, I pray my sons won't go to war, but if they must, they must. And in God I place my trust. So that line of, we must be doing something right to last 200 years, as though just lasting 200 years is a good thing. Right. Yeah. That ties away again to the ending of like, there is just this, the way that she is singing her heart out, the way that the crowd is clapping along, the way that we have no sense of whether Barbara Jean is alive or dead, right? Like, the last thing we hear before she starts tepidly singing is somebody going, oh man, I can't stop the blood, man. And then she starts singing "It Don't Worry Me." And the crowd is like, yeah, let's go. It really just, whenever I'm at my most despondent or hopeless, I watch that ending. And I think and
feel even more hopeless.
Well, that is truthfully, this is not to get too deep into my personal life, but this is part of my thing. It's one of the things that I struggle with a lot is when I'm feeling hopeless or despondent about a certain situation in the world, right? I can't handle when people go, well, don't worry about it, or here's something to cheer you up, or here's something to take your mind off of it. What I need and what brings me comfort is like the feeling of, okay, other people think this is fucked up too, right? Like, other people think this is insane too, right? Like, other people are like, what's going on? Like, there were so many kind of little moments along the way where I just started, where I have these things where as long as everybody else is turning around, at the height of the pandemic, as long as most people are turning around and going, yeah, this is insane that there's a disease in our breath that can kill people and we all have to stay. Yeah, that's terrifying. As long as everybody's saying that, I feel fine. It's the other times where shit's going on and people are just like, yeah, listen, whatever. What can we do? What can we do? Something. We should all want to do something. So Don't Worry Me really. Ideal. Yeah, It Don't Worry Me really kind of hits me in that moment because it like taps into where I get my anxiety from, which is not even, oh, something's gone wrong. It's the fact that like, it's the that ending is the embodiment of, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the show? Right? Like, that's the epitome of, like, oh my God, so I don't know. And it, to this day, like,
it's brilliant. Yeah.
And to this day, when I watch it and she starts singing Mama and Daddy raised me with love and care, I start to get tense. It's a movie. I shouldn't be tense, but I'm just like, fuck, I know what's coming. I know what's coming. Oh God. Because it still gets you every time, Ugh.
I mean, yeah, the ending's amazing, and I really do like this movie. Mike saw my letterbox. I gave it 4 out of 5 out of 5. So I'm not like at a full perfect, it's my favorite fucking movie in the world thing, but I really like it, and I locked into it more this time. But it really is the ending that really, like, it is a perfect ending. It's the thing that brings it all together, and whatever quibbles you can have with the movie, I guess it's more just a taste thing why it keeps it from a 5 for me. But like, whatever you think about it, whatever, like, by the time you get to that ending, you're just it's just like watching fucking Babe Ruth point to center field and then hit the home run, and you're just like, fuck, he did it. Okay, good for you, buddy.
Well, I think the other thing, this movie rewards multiple watches, because once you've seen it, once you know where it's going, and you watch it again, there's so many little things going on. I mean, there's the brilliance of, like,
I can't believe
I'm
going to do this for the third time. I'm going to bring up R.E.M. This is insane. This is insane behavior. Do you guys know? I don't even know how deep you get into R.E.M. It's fine. But there's a later days R.E.M. They had a song called "Imitation of Life." Mm-hmm. This is the video where everything is happening in this. It's like just a constant, like, everyone's constantly moving, but you're supposed to let the camera, for 3 minutes and 3.5 minutes, it just focuses on kind of one part of this kind of collage for 5 seconds, and then elsewhere. And it is like, look, I know this is like a tenuous claim to try to make, but it's very Altman-esque, because that's kind of what his movies, there's always shit going on in the background.
Yeah.
People are always kind of talking, and you're just like very voyeuristic, hearing like bits and pieces of their conversation, and just maybe just like catching something in the middle or like at the very end. And that's like what that video is like. But sorry, I had to bring that up while it was still in my mind.
Part of the brilliance of that is his AD, either his first AD or his second AD. Every single person in the scene, every extra. And the extras weren't actual extras, by the way. The extras were like local people, because Altman really didn't want to deal with the unions, so he like didn't want to hire actual extras. Again, a beautiful contradiction about Robert Altman is he's like, listen, I'm a bleeding heart liberal and also fuck the unions, right? He's simultaneously, he's like Woody Guthrie 90% of the time, and then, and then Joseph McCarthy. But anyway, his AD gave every single person in any scene, including crowd scenes, anything, other than the very end where they had like hundreds of people, everything else, including the houseboat and everything, he gave every single person a character. Right? And so what that does, and I said this to Tom, one of the things I love on the houseboat, when Ronnie Blakely's about to have her breakdown, right? And she's going on her rambling, right? About, my grandparents, they had chickens. They go, pop, pop, pop. If you look, almost out of focus, 2 of the background singers, when she starts breaking down, one of them nudges the other, and the 2 start laughing to each other. Right? Or during the Grand Ole Opry, if you can watch the performances, you'll have a great time. But if you look in the background, Opal has made her way onto the stage in the doorway of the Opry, holding her microphone, and you see security come over and take her out. There's these little things, or even editing choices.
And Steve Earle in the audience too. In that.
Oh
Opry,
shit, is he really?
Yeah, country singer Steve Earle.
Wow.
Yep.
The Wire star Steve Earle.
That's right.
As Tom knows him.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah,
helped Bubs.
You kind of look like Steve Earle a little bit, actually, Tom.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen a picture
without the hair.
Yeah, he's without the hair, but
like from eyebrows down.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also some editing choices. I mean, I mentioned the gag early on when what's his face, Henry Gibson turns out, he goes, get a haircut. You don't belong in Nashville. Cut to a giant sign that says "Welcome to Nashville." But another one I love is Opal's going on her speech about why assassinations are so common in America, right? And she says to him, all these people have guns. They're the ones pulling the trigger. Immediately cuts to Kenny on the phone with his mom. Right? This is a movie that Altman knows the puzzle he's putting together. Right? And the more you watch it, the more you can find these little things that where, I mean, one of the things that I love is, people can say the movie is disjointed because it doesn't offer satisfying answers for all of the things it's addressing, right? But I think that's great that it kind of brings up points. Like there's a racial dynamic to it, right? There's obviously, the guy from Detroit taking exception to the one black country music star.
Yep.
Right?
Johnny Brown, Dave.
Yeah,
Right?
Tommy
Something like
Brown,
that,
right?
Brown. Tommy Brown,
yelling at him. Meanwhile, you could absolutely tell there's something going on between Tommy Brown and his wife. I don't know what it is, but we only really see her twice. Once is when Opal is introduced to her, right? To this meek woman. It's like, oh, you're her wife. And then later when she's on stage with Tommy and looks visibly uncomfortable for some reason. There's something going on there. The movie doesn't dig into it. And all it does is it's Altman going, look, there's some racial issues going on in country music today. I'm not going to comment on them, probably because I'm not qualified to comment on them. And if you remember the name of Fred Williamson's character in MASH, I'm very glad he didn't feel qualified to comment on them. But anyway, Tom just watched MASH today and had that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they say that a certain movie can't be made today, they can't make that fucking movie today.
I'm afraid of season 8. Anyway.
It's going to be fun. I feel like we're probably about to wrap up, but just for the editing point, I feel like when it comes to people talk about editing, it's always like, I feel like people don't understand the fact that a lot of times editing is whittling down and not just finding the right ways to cut between scenes, but this movie was like almost 4 hours long. And there was even talks about releasing it in 2 parts, as if it was a fucking Frank Herbert novel.
It was a 5-hour cut before that.
I think they wanted to do a 10-part miniseries actually on ABC is what I read.
Well, ABC.
Yeah, so there was just so many. It was so long, but so the fact that he had all of this material, and the fact that you even go, oh my god, well, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. He had even more. Well, it's pretty impressive to whittle down all of that to something that's this monumental but still digestible, and manages to make all his points and leave you feeling like you kind of lived in Nashville for 5 days. That's impressive. And that's an impressive thing.
And include little things that, like, you might at first glance think, well, if I'm cutting something, let's cut Keenan Wynn at the funeral for his wife, right? You could see somebody thinking that. But then you watch it again and you realize, right, Kenny is at the funeral with Keenan Wynn. The only reason Kenny winds up at the rally is because Keenan Wynn says, we need to go there and find my granddaughter.
Find Joan.
Right?
Which is why I wonder, right, so would he have been at the rally anyway? That's yeah.
And that there's an alternate world where there by the grace of God, because he befriended this old man, he didn't shoot her. But Ronnie Blakely isn't supposed to be at the rally until she has the breakdown at the houseboat, right? And arguably she doesn't have the breakdown at the houseboat if she wasn't getting so upset about Karen Black coming in. There's so many little things. So, that it is a movie that is so far reaching, but like Tom's saying, that you can trim it down and still keep something that has that effect of this happens, and so this happens, and so this happens, and so this happens, which is remarkable.
It's I mean, just on all levels, it's an impressive fucking movie. And whether you quibble between 4.5 and 5, like either way, like this is a movie that you're gonna really, for all that we talked about, the political stuff, the filmmaking stuff, the musicality of it all, like this is a landmark movie, I think, in 70s cinema. And I'm glad I did get to rewatch it, because like I said earlier, I was a little cool on it when I first watched it, but I was a dumb boy, and now I'm a dumb man, so at least I can appreciate it on a little bit of a more mature level. So
I want to say one other thing that I want to make sure I acknowledge, which is just, we touched on Sulene a bit, right? But I really want to acknowledge, like, Gwen Wells' phenomenal performance in it. Right?
I mean,
really
listen,
great.
that's the striptease scene is probably the most brutal fucking scene I've seen in probably in like 5 days, because I saw the Zone of Interest 5 days ago. But
yeah, she doesn't break down. Like, that's the thing I love, and I think that honestly is Gene's influence, right? Is that that Tewksbury comes in because Altman, and I mean no disrespect to Altman, right? But Altman might have, left to his own devices, made a meal out of that scene, right? He might have made her really feel something or feel nothing, whereas Sulene is just quietly sad, right? She just has the face on of a woman who's like, I don't want to be doing this, but I will do it. And I think that's such an important note to hit, and you could tell that Tewksbury had an influence on that.
Well, based on watching MASH today and hearing the rumors about how maybe Warren Beatty actually directed McCabe and Mrs. Miller, I don't think Altman has some great things going on in his body about women.
Well, no, because you haven't seen Three Women yet. I promise you, when you see Three Women, it's different. But
maybe he worked through it by then.
But I'm just saying, that's, and I only note that because one of the things I discovered is I'm watching this and I'm like, man, a lot of these other people went out through things. Gwen Wells, what happened? Found out she died at just 42 years old. She died in 1993 of cancer. So somebody who was, and she was, to her credit, fearless in this movie. Apparently, the one thing Tewksbury told me that I love this anecdote is she signed on for the film and was totally fine with doing the nudity in the stripping scene. But her one concern is, I want to sound good. And Tewksbury was like, no, you can't sound good.
Yeah.
And Gwen was like, I'm going to take singing lessons. And Gwen was like, please don't take singing lessons. Well, Gwen Wells went and took singing lessons. Came to set, said, I took singing lessons. And Gene was like, oh, geez, what are we going to do? Then she sang for them. And Gene went, oh, thank God. It didn't work. Great. Awesome. Yeah. And it kind of adds to the character a bit because Gwen put in the effort to take these singing lessons. And came back with a confidence like, well, now I'm trained, so now I'm good.
Oh, she's a little bit of a Sulene. That's so sad.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on that is that I realized I had sort of Mandela affected myself with this movie. Because before I rewatched it for this, in my head, I'm just like, right. So, he comes to her and he goes, I'm going to Detroit, come with me. And she goes with him. I wanted her to have a happier ending, so my brain just rewrote it that she gets away okay. Yep. And instead she witnesses a murder.
That's so cute.
God.
Who amongst us hasn't, though?
Yeah.
So, does anybody have any kind of... I mean, I could have talked about this for hours. We actually went way longer than we normally do.
It wouldn't have been a recap of this movie if we didn't go long, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is truly with Nashville, I could have been I don't know if you guys remember, there was a very obscure sketch from The State. Do you remember The State, Andrew? The MTV show?
Yeah, of course.
So there was this
$240 worth of
pudding.
Pudding, right? Yep, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Louis, I want to dip my balls in it. Yep.
So there was a runner they do. Oh, sorry. You're saying?
Yeah.
But there was
I was going to say, somewhere in the room next to this one, I've got a signed DVD collection from all members of the state. So
that rules.
Do I know the state?
Showalter signed my DVD because
that rules.
You can look this up online. I used to teach a kids theater program, and we one year made 60 school children perform Porcupine Racetrack. And then we put it up on YouTube.
Yep.
Yeah, we put it up on YouTube, and Tom Lennon tweeted it out. It was very cool.
Did you watch? Sorry, I'm sure you've seen it. During COVID, though, they all reunited and sang Porcupine Racetrack. Yeah.
So anyway, there was this runner they did on one episode of The State, which is them announcing world records, right? So somebody will just stack right, and there's one that's just two guys talking on the couch, and one's just going. So when Harry Dean Stanton shows up and he's looking through the mirror, and David Wayne comes and goes, these two men are about to break the world record for the most time two men can sit in a room and talk about the movie Paris, Texas. And that, when I was preparing for this episode, I'm like, we're veering on that territory because I could absolutely be a guy of going to break the world record for guys sitting around talking about Nashville. I could absolutely break that record.
That is a great way to end. However, I feel like can we spend 20 more seconds on Tricycle Man? We didn't really talk about
Please.
Just that. What do you think the role, I actually just want to kind of what is your guys' read on that character? I know that he kind of does connect the major, he connects the thread, so to speak. He is that thorough kind of line throughout the movie. Is there anything deeper than that other than they probably just thought that it was, good sight gag, this giant thing that, he started writing after Easy Rider probably. And they even reference that, right?
Yeah.
I wonder what the function of the Goldblum character is.
I think part of it is he exists. I think you can see him as existing in contrast to Shelley Duvall, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Because Shelley Duvall is, a vapid character, right? She's pointedly like she's there for a reason, but she's choosing to go somewhere else, right? She's choosing to do other things to be with her grandmother. Goldblum is fully within himself. He's just there. He's just experiencing it. But he's also there in contrast to Opal. Because Opal is trying to inject herself into everything and missing the point constantly.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where, in the great irony in the end, she's there to get all these stories. Barbara Jean gets shot and she runs in later. What happened? What did I miss? What did I miss?
She misses it, yeah.
The world's shittiest journalist.
Yeah.
But then Goldblum, most times when he pops up, he just happens to be there for these interesting moments, right? He never speaks.
Nope.
And he just is there. He shows up at a diner and a woman just walks up and goes, "Do you want to hear my song?" And all of that. He's just there. He's just this energy. And I think, if Easy Rider was this metaphor for like the American free spirit, right? He's kind of that in an extension. Like Altman is almost like, there is this thing. There are so many quote unquote free spirits in this movie, like Keith Carradine, like Shelley Duvall. But Tricycle Man is the only one who walks the walk, you know, like, or
trikes the trike.
Yeah. But that's the thing, like, if that's when you look at the 60s going into the 70s, there's so much of the 70s reflecting on the 60s, the hippies, the free spirits. There is this idea of how many of those guys that claim to be like, I'm just a free spirit, we're just doing it for selfish ends, right? How many people in this movie are doing all these things for selfish ends? He is at least the purest form of that. Like he is genuinely like, I just show up, I do my thing, whatever. I'm just here. I pop in, I do my thing. I think that's, and it ends up being a thing that kind of Goldblum does for a while, right? Yeah. That's kind of, Tricycle Man is almost like the cooler cousin of his Big Chill character, right? Or the cooler cousin of his one scene cameo in Annie Hall with, hello, I forgot my mantra, He kind of plays that. But yeah, Tom, what about you? Tricycle Man.
Well said.
I think he's a poser. No, honestly, the fact that it's a tricycle and not a bicycle makes it feel like he wants to be one of those guys, but he's not really that dedicated to it.
Yeah.
And he's just...
So he's performing, back to my thesis there. Yeah. Okay. Very smart, Andrew. Love it.
Yeah.
Tom. Love it.
Yeah. Wait, no. I want to keep that exactly as it is. I love that you go. So, because you just went, that brings it back to my thesis. They're all performing. Very smart, Andrew. Great.
Obama giving Obama himself a meme.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Where's my medal? I love it. That's great.
So without, unless there's more to add, because
I just had one more hot take.
Yes.
Sorry, and this might come up in Oscars talk, but the song that won the Oscar from this movie, I don't know if you're going to quiz Tom on this. I think it sucks. I think it's actually the worst song in the movie. Possibly.
Wow, that is a hot take. Wow,
it's tuneless. It's tuneless. It's like can Carradine. He can sing fine, but I just don't think there's any kind of discernible like sticky melody to that. And maybe I was like way too analytical when listening to that one again. I think that song sucks.
I'll say this, with I'm Easy, I think it's perfect for that moment because it is a song that if you are, he gets up and he goes, "Oh, I wrote this song for a girl," right?
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not going to say, and this isn't true for all of us, right? But I will say, for the people who maybe have multiple people here who have guitars in their homes,
let's go.
Who I'm not going to talk. Listen, Andrew, I don't know your life.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that. I will just say, for the people who maybe learned how to play guitar and at least once told a girl, "I wrote this song for you," and would now, if asked to play that song, rather jump off of a building.
Hey, I'm married to the girl that I did that to several times. So yeah, it works. It can work. Yeah. It doesn't mean I still don't want to jump off the building when I try to think about it.
I was going to say, would you feel comfortable playing any of those songs now though?
I don't know. I have no shame. So probably, but yes.
Well, listen, if you want, this is, we can do it right now. You got it behind you. But I do think that it's perfect because this is exactly the kind of song that a guy like that writes to try and win somebody over, because on the one hand, like when you listen to it, he's basically saying like, "Hey, listen, you know, I'll be yours if you just don't lie to me, if you just don't deceive me." But actually, it's a pretty simple, vapid song, right?
Yeah,
I'm easy.
He's a dummy.
Right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I won't put up any fight, this and that. And ultimately, you know, it kind of shows how little he's got going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And his inability, you know, he's easy because, as Tom alluded, once he has a moment of genuine deep connection, he panics. That's why he's easy. He's easygoing because he doesn't want to think about anything with any depth, right? Like he, you know, even him telling Scott Glenn, like, "Hey, did you kill anybody today?" He picked up his politics from somebody else. You know, he would have been one of those guys on Twitter who just started saying shit that they heard somebody on a podcast say, you know? If Keith Carradine's character were around today, he would just keep going, "Why hasn't the White House codified this yet?" And you'd go, "What does codify mean?" And he'd go,
Right.
"Fixes it." That's what.
He's easy.
Yeah, he's exactly that kind of guy. So
that's why you're the best in the biz. I'm coming at this. I just think the song itself melodically is not, but you broke it down so eloquently, and that was great.
Well, I mean, we've already alluded to the Oscar-winning song, which on that note, I will say nothing to me to this day is funnier than showing somebody the video for Madonna's Material Girl and going, somebody in this music video has an Oscar for songwriting. Guess who it is? It's only one of them. And it's not Robert Wool. Anyway. So yeah, that's Robert Wool is in the Material Girl video for like 5 seconds. He's like right at the beginning. He's the assistant to Keith Carradine's director. So with that in mind, Tom, how do you think Nashville performed at the Academy Awards?
Now
this is
Best
going to be
Picture nomination, Best Director nomination. Lily Tomlin and Roni Blakely, supporting actress, and then I guess I'm easy for Best Original Song. Maybe Best Editing.
Oh, you fucked it up. Tom, before you said maybe Best Editing, you had a perfect score for the first time in the history of this show. You nailed it 100%.
Yeah, well, that's me. 3.4 student.
Tom, you hit on 19. Like, that's what you just did there, you know? That was how you played it. Okay, so it was nominated for Best Picture alongside. Now, get ready for this. Andrew, do you know the other Best Picture nominees offhand?
Okay, so
and I only say this because
year. This is for 75.
75.
So the 76 Oscars for 75 movies.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
This is
Let me see.
Maybe the best Picture lineup since 1930.
So Godfather 2.
No. That's
right?
74.
Oh, fuck. So, right, 75 Oscar. Okay, I'm sorry. So, Conversation?
Nope.
That's
Day? The same year as... yes, you got Dog Day.
Okay, so Dog Day? Deer Hunter? No. Deer Hunter? No.
No.
Okay, go ahead. Okay. I don't want to take
it. Well, no, it's fine. So, Dog Day, right? Nashville. Barry Lyndon.
Okay.
Jaws. And the winner, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Wow.
What a year.
So the year before was Chinatown, Godfather
2. Chinatown, Godfather 2, Conversation.
Yeah.
Towering Inferno, and Lenny.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for the tangent. Yep.
Tom, I was going to say, do you want to do it?
Boo.
Every
Lenny
time.
Sucks.
There it is. You have done this at least 5 times on this show now.
Who won director that year?
So it was nominated for Best Director, but it lost to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest for Milos Forman. It was nominated for Supporting Actress for Ronnie Blakely and for Lily Tomlin, both of whom lose to Lee Grant for Shampoo.
Oh.
And then I'm Easy wins Nashville its only Oscar for Best Original Song. So that is how Nashville fared. Now, part of that, and I will note, is that Nashville suffered from a thing we deal with a lot today, backlash. I will just note this real quick. Robert Altman wasn't sure how to get the movie, if the movie was going to get released. So before it's even finished, there's a rough cut, and he calls up Pauline Kael. Says, come watch this movie, and she writes a pre-review of it, calling it one of the greatest movies of all time and saying it will change the way that cinema is made. And this review and this concept of a pre-review is received so negatively that some people start writing, well, why not just review a script? Why not just review concept art? And there is a pre-film Twitter kind of Nashville backlash because nobody could talk about this movie without talking about Pauline Kael's pre-review for it. So when you consider that and you look at how Nashville fared at the Oscars, I'm not suggesting that, Milos Forman wasn't going to win. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was probably always going to win, not just because it's a standout film, but also, hey, Kirk Douglas's son produced a movie. There's that. Does Lee Grant win for Shampoo if not for that backlash? I don't know. Ronnie and Lily are both new. People are probably thinking, well, their time will come, and it doesn't for either of them. Maybe somebody will get Lily Tomlin an Oscar one day, but I don't think I don't think 80 for Brady really worked out in that direction. So who's to say?
So we'll be doing that one in 10 years, probably, when the registry inducts 80 for Brady. Yeah. Okay.
It's coming. It's coming.
Will you guys invite me back on for that one?
That's
absolutely.
I can promise you that. 80
Thank
for
you.
Brady,
Great.
you got. And with that being said, Andrew Daniels, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you
My
so much
pleasure.
for agreeing to
It
do
was
this.
super fun.
Yeah. It started, I will say, this journey started with you half jokingly going to me like, okay, but you got to have me on your podcast. No, I'm just kidding. And I went, no, fuck it. You want to do this? Like, no
You
one
said it.
please come on down. Like, no one's stopping you. Like, absolutely. Like, it's,
Anytime.
Oh, we're so glad you did this.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to plug? Anything you want to, toss out there to folks? Anything like that?
No.
Good.
This podcast. If I had
Good.
my own podcast, I'd plug that. But no, I have nothing to plug. I just good times with dudes. On a pod.
Dudes
Like you
rock.
said before, I'm fun at parties. So catch me at a party.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and just I don't know. I wish I was better prepared to answer that question, but I don't know. Nothing's going on.
That's fine. All good. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming on. But everybody else, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration, on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
Okay, so as I was telling the boys before, there's a lot of ways you could go with this movie. One of them being a movie I already picked before, Magnolia, so that's off the table. And then there's things like, maybe you put up another Altman or, something along those lines. And I thought, I don't know, that's a little too obvious. I'm feeling a little frisky. The movie itself is a bit chaotic. I think it's time for Tommy to drop one of his patented Tom Logic chaos picks. And the thinking I was going with my pick is not just that this movie is about a very specific subset of cultural life in America, with a bunch of characters all representing the various aspects of American life. And at the end of the day, ultimately being a screed, an angry screed without being abrasively angry, where there's still some fun and humor to be had and some tragedy and all of that, where it's just a complete package. And the way most people feel that Nashville is Altman's masterpiece, I'm going with this filmmaker's absolute masterpiece. His look into a specific subset of American life while completely demolishing the very idea of the American dream and the fools that chase the American dream and chase fame and chase money and all of this nonsense, blinding themselves to the fact that it's all bullshit. And if we get shot on stage, we will just be dragged off while everyone else ignores what happened and we play a little show tune. My pick this episode is Pain and Gain from Michael Bay. I think that is one of the best movies of the 21st century about the American dream, about America, about the dopes that are very clearly poisoning the American dream, the American experiment, if you will. And I think Michael Bay is a divisive figure and all that. I get it. A lot of people think he's a dumbass and he makes dumb movies. I'm not one of those people. And this isn't an irony pick, as much as I said it's my chaos pick. It's not an irony pick. I think the man is, in his own way, is very much a chronicler of America and what ills America. And he does it in a very popcorn, over the top, bang, bang, shoot 'em up way and all of that. I get that. But I think there is a central through line through his movies of the rot in America. And this is the movie that maybe more clearly crystallizes his absolutely cynical, nihilistic view of America and the American dream and the dopes that follow it blindly and will throw people under the bus and fuck everyone over just to get a little taste of the American dream. I think one of the most inspired lines in the movie that really is very relevant today is Mark Wahlberg's character telling Tony Shalhoub is, I don't just want everything you have, I just want you to not have it. And I mean, if that's not kind of what's fueling a lot of shit that's going around these days, I don't know what is. I think it's funny. I think it's based on a true story. A lot of details changed. The way Nashville is kind of like a lot of real characters, blah blah blah, chains, all that. Yeah, we get it. But I do think it's a genuine masterpiece. And Michael Bay is one of, for better or worse, one of the most well-known, important filmmakers of the last 30 years. I might want to put a bunch of his movies in the registry, but I know that would be being as gluttonous as the characters in this movie. But I do think he needs to have some sort of representation here. And if there was ever going to be a movie that I think speaks volumes to him and his view and kind of the closest he ever got and probably will ever get to making a registry ready movie, I think it is Pain and Gain. So I am going with that wonderful movie where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson puts a foot on a grill and cooks it.
Well, Tom, if you're going chaos pick, I think I have to go chaos pick too.
Hell yeah.
So, Nashville. It's a fascinating thing. It covers the spectrum of America. It's both patriotic and satirical and cynical. It's both in favor of country music and its roots and mocking it. You can't quite figure out how you're supposed to feel with the ending because is it bleak or is it upbeat because the tune is so catchy? And there's another film that comes out 2 years after Nashville, though filmed, I believe, before it. And really, it's less about the film itself and more about the group within it. To get an idea of the ethos of Nashville and how it relates to this film, I'd just like to read you some lyrics. Red and white, blue suede shoes. I'm Uncle Sam. How do you do? Give me 5. I'm still alive. Ain't no luck. I learned to duck. Wave that flag. Wave it wide and high. Now understand that these lyrics are, in the beginning of this film, sung by a cartoon skeleton on a motorcycle before it transitions to Jerry Garcia on stage. I am putting up the Grateful Dead movie. There are few bands whose work is as fundamentally American on both sides of that perspective, both patriotic and satirical. Grateful Dead plays a lot with American iconography. I mean, I point to United States Blues because it opens the film, but also that song, Wave That Flag, Wave It Wide and High, is that legitimately Hell Yeah America? Is that satirical? Is that taking back America from conservatism, or is that conservative in and of itself? You know, there are a few concert films in the National Film Registry as it stands: The Last Waltz, Woodstock, Wattstacks. We've talked about, we haven't talked about them on the podcast as proper episodes yet, but we know they're there. And I think if you are making something that is culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, when you're talking about music, American music, I think the Grateful Dead ticks off all three of those boxes: culturally, historically, aesthetically significant. They're a band that was also a movement in a way that very few bands are. And while there are imitators and while there are descendants of the Grateful Dead, there's never been anybody that's quite like the Dead. Not to mention, I've talked about it on this podcast before, the opening 5 minutes of that movie that are just like the movie Heavy Metal condensed into 5 psychedelic minutes is so good. So I'm putting it up from 1977, The Grateful Dead movie.
Next week,
David Gloveband joins us to talk about The Night of the Hunter.
He's a character who says he's a preacher. There's no history. He's banking that people won't ask questions because he knows a couple of stories from the Bible. He goes around with his weird hat and talks about how he preaches the word of God, but he's not formally ordained or trained in any ministry or church.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natale and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kyle Lampar and edited by Mike Natale and Kyle Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time. Because we don't watch you, you're watching us.